If you find this episode helpful, consider becoming a Kettle Knight. Simply click the join button on our YouTube channel and become a podcast supporter. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another powerful episode of the Kettle Knights podcast. I have with me a legend in Europe as far when it comes to the world of giveaway sport, of kettlebell sport. I have with me Gregor Sobocan. So I have heard about Gregor from multiple corners. I've talked to a lot of kettlebell folks, and some of them directed me to Gregor's book. I read it, and I told him before we got started with the podcast, unfortunately, I can't find it again, so I have to maybe buy it from you again.
I will send one copy to you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So I have to reread it. And I'm really flattered that you're joining the podcast because it's always fun and always fascinating to talk to people who have achieved something in the kettlebell world, not only from an athletic point of view, but also you've been a coach, you've pushed the idea of kettlebell sport and giveaway sport. So Gregor, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, hello, and thank you for having me, and also for the introduction. I haven't heard so many good things about me lately, so you can repeat it again if you want to.
Okay, so we're already friends, right? I'm assuming. Awesome. So, Gregor, as we always do with all the guests that we have on our podcast, please give us your backstory. How did you get started with kettlebells? Why did you choose the kettlebell sport route, and your achievements, and what happened until now?
So the story is pretty long. I hope we have enough time.
Yeah, we have. We do.
We do. I was a handball player, the European style handball. I was not pretty talented. I could play, but mostly because I was a little bit stronger than everybody else. And as I was progressing up the leagues, as I was getting older, I was running out of the options to getting stronger. So I was searching a little bit for new material and how to get this edge a little bit more. So how can I extend my career among professionals? And I ran into Pavel Tsatsoulin's book, Power to the People.
As we all have, many of us have. Yeah. Everybody has.
I suggest that book to anybody, even though it doesn't have to do anything with kettlebells. It's more powerlifting stuff. But at the end of this book, I really liked it. I read it, I think, in 2 days, and then I used the programs from it. So at the end of the book, there were commercials for this RKC, Russian Kettlebell Challenge. So I was digging into kettlebells, and I have to say this was before the Facebook time. It was in 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
So it's before the Facebook started. So I was started using the internet. I was 21 years old, 21, 22. So yeah, I was digging for it. I didn't have my credit card number, so one friend of mine ordered another book, the Russian Kettlebell Challenge book, and we also had those videotapes.
Yeah, of course.
To explain for the young generation what that is.
They're so legendary right now. It's legendary material. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, it was a videotape. This was before CDs. Or DVDs or whatever. So.
Isn't it crazy that this is 20 years ago, right? And it feels like it's been ages ago because so many things have changed, right? Technology wise, it's
now
so
you
crazy.
Just click a few times and you have it on your Mac or on your computer.
Exactly.
But then I had to wait for like 14 days to send it from the United States.
This is so crazy. Yeah.
So yeah, when I got the challenge, the kettlebell, the book is amazing. It was still more about strength than giveaway sport, but at the time I only had the book, so I asked my ex-girlfriend's father to melt 2 kettlebells.
Not really.
Really, I still have the picture in my book. I probably have it somewhere on my Facebook. So those were homemade from some lead weights, and I used some pipes. So we built my first kettlebell that I could train. Because if I wanted to go to the Russian Kettlebell Challenge and do the license, I had to pass the Russian Kettlebell Challenge test. So if I wanted to train, I had to have a kettlebell. There were no kettlebells in Europe at that time, except in Russia. So I was training with this, whatever I made on my own. And then I went in 2000, and I really can't remember, was it 2004 or 2005? I went to St. Paul, Minnesota. It was the 3 or 4 day certification with Pavel Tsatsouline, and it was strength with kettlebells. It was lots of mobility. It was loads of stuff. It was amazing. And there I met Steve Maxwell and Steve Cotter also, among other coaches. And Steve Cotter at the time, he said, well, there is another thing among kettlebells. It's called Gregor sport. So it's a little bit different. And he was the one who was doing researches about Gregor sport at the time. And a year later, I was invited to be a part of staff in Europe for the Russian Kettlebell Challenge level 2 in Denmark. So I went to Denmark. It was nice. One day before that, I broke my leg. So I went up with a cast. There is a whole video of me lifting kettlebells, doing seated version of snatch test, passing that test.
That's dedication, man. Wow.
Yeah, and I did the beast challenge with 48 kilos of standing on one leg and stuff like this. So actually, you were
pretty strong, man. This is
Well, yeah, at the time I was really strong because I was training for strength. I didn't know about Gregor sport yet, so my priority was like 3 to 5 reps. The pull-ups, the press, the pistol squat, the deadlift. So yeah, I was doing this stuff on one leg, and when the RKC published that video, I became pretty famous. So yeah, they did me a big favor promoting that, and the video was viral. It went like 1 million views all over the world.
Is it still on somewhere?
It is. I think if you write on YouTube RKC Challenge 2006 or 2007 Denmark, something like this.
Let me just check for a second.
Yeah, and then the video is with the Russian national anthem. It's amazing. It's amazing video, especially because I mean.
So it was RKC 2006 Denmark.
I think it was 2006 because I'm not sure if 6 or 7 because I'm not sure which year I signed for that handbook.
Yeah, there's something in RKC 2007.
Maybe it's 7.
Yeah. And then I have to.
Starts with an intro with the red letters. Yeah. Yeah, there is one part dedicated to me when I was passing the test.
I gotta write this down. Yeah, this is. Let me copy this, man, because I feel like when I talk to people like you, it's like I'm becoming a kettlebell scientist. I want to learn so much about this tool. And that's why I'm so honored to have you on. And then when you share stories like this is fuel for the fire I need to burn. This is fascinating, man. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I forget what I went through, and then when I have to tell the story, I kind of feel
it comes back, right? Yeah. Yes. And I mean, I've been certified by Steve Cotter in 2019, so he's my sensei. And so when you shared his name, I mean, he was also pivotal, right, in moving the needle. Yeah. When it comes to kettlebells, a little bit towards the Russian way of training, especially when it comes to the ballistics, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So yes, then you had this famous incident in Denmark, yes?
Yeah. At that time, RKC was kind of falling apart. There were some issues inside. I don't know what it was. And then Steve Cotter told me about Valery Fedorenko, the guy who also moved to United States and who introduced him to kettlebells, to Gregor sport. And actually, it was Steve Cotter who was the first guy, the first coach who put kettlebells on the video. He put Valery Fedorenko on his encyclopedia of kettlebell lifting, something like this. It's 5-hour videotape.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's amazing material. I really liked it. I'm still using stuff. So yeah, then I decided I will go and check who this guy is and what kettlebell sport as a sport really is. I went to Greece for my first certification. I met Valery there. I met his coach, Filikidi Panteleis. There was also Steve Cotter and some guys. So I passed the certification. It was not really physically that hard, but technically it was something completely different. So it was the first time for me, and I immediately told Valery, well, master of sports, that sounds so cool. I want to be master of sports, though I had no idea. I had no idea what it was.
what it is, right? Yes.
It was 2007 in the summer, I think. I think it was summer 2007. And then 2 years later, in 2009, maybe I'm mixing up a little bit of those dates, but around those times, I went back to Greece for another camp. Also, Valery was leading it, and I was already preparing for my Master of Sports. And it was the first time I failed. I didn't do the numbers because, I just wanted it too fast. I was training just hard, not smart. So
and you were just for people to understand it, you were already using double 32s for the Master of Sport, right?
I started to use double 32s too quick. I know that's a mistake now because I was really strong from all the powerlifting and all the jumping and all the athletic stuff I did. So I was really strong. My endurance was high because I always like to run and stuff like this. So I felt, well, if I can lift it once and I build my endurance, it's gonna happen. But yeah, it doesn't work this way. So you have after that, I went back to 24s, and Valerie made me do 10 minutes with 24s and then a little faster pace and stuff like this. So
Yeah, typical
yeah,
preparation.
he taught me, yeah, typical preparation. He taught me most of the stuff I know about kettlebell sport. So then I was invited to be part of World Kettlebell Club or World Kettlebell. Yeah, it was WKC, something
Yeah,
like this.
WKC, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was head coach there for Europe, so I was doing lots of certifications in Europe for them. But at one point, they decided that Europe is too small and that there's not enough business, so they just let me do something on my own, but not under their brand. So this is when I opened my own brand, European Gregors Sport Association. So it was EGSA, which later
That's
on,
your thing.
yeah. That's my thing. I opened this association. I started this movement. So with this movement, everything in Europe started. I licensed probably over 1,000 coaches in Europe. So it started in Croatia with one of my friends.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of them in Vienna, and then I went to Germany, Netherlands, all over the world, and the Portugal, Spain. So I was all over the world doing my thing. And in 2010, I'm pretty sure it was 2010, I was invited by WKC for my last seminar, where I passed my Master of Sports in biathlon. So they had a little bit different rules, which was, I mean, they were cool on one side, but I can explain a little bit more later. But I managed to do the required number of reps for Master of Sports. And then when I came home, I was like, well, I wasn't really happy because I knew at that time there's another title that's called Master of Sports International class.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
like miles away from what I did. And then at some point, I was a little bit bored with Valeri's system of training because I like variety, and Valeri's training had little variety in it. So I asked Ivan Deniso to help me. So he was my coach for 2 years, and I progressed a lot. But his way of training was a little bit too heavy for me. I mean, it was lots of lifting weights. There were lots of heavy kettlebells. So I couldn't really relate to that. So in 2013, I think, 2013, I asked Anton Antonenko to be my coach, to be my mentor. And until 2013 to 2017, when I finished with kind of professional, if I can say professional, giveaway sport, Anton was my coach, and under his guidance, I did Master of Sports International class. And I learned everything about kettlebell sport, which was not only preparation for competition, but everything else that is going on around that sport. So I think I learned the most about life of kettlebell lifter from Anton Antonenko. So that's, and in 2017, I decided that I'm gonna call it a day.
Okay, so wow, that's fast forward, right? So you went really fast through all these major cornerstones, and wow, this is so fascinating. So Anton Antonenko, I've heard his name a lot. Where is he on the let's say like on the coach's ladder when you prepare him with Sergei Rudnev and Valery Fedorenko? He's at that level.
Well, Valery Fedorenko is a little bit different coach because his system is really straightforward. So he doesn't talk about technique much. He had very special technique. He was naturally gifted athlete, and his technique was unique. So I couldn't relate to what he was doing and the way he was training. So if you're built like Valery Fedorenko, he's an amazing coach. He can do it, but I'm not built like him, so my rack position was not as good as his was. So I cannot stand in a rack position for a long time. And then Ivan Deniso was the first who said, well, why stand? Just leave them. So don't just stand and go slow, just go faster.
Just go fast. Just
go faster, yeah. And then I had to use lighter, yeah.
So it's the idea, right? And that's what I've learned as well. When it comes to the body type, if you have a short torso and long arms, you have the perfect recipe for a solid rack position, which allows you to rest more. So therefore, you will probably be able to crank out more reps at the end because you have more or not as much fatigue is setting in. But when it comes to a different body type, so for example, you have a long torso, you won't be able to rack to find a solid rack position. So therefore, you have to go fast, right? So that's one point, and that's because I've talked to Valery Fedorenko as well. I've had him on a podcast. I've talked to Sergey Rudnev. I've had him on a podcast. So that's why I'm also fascinated with kettlebells just in general. I'm not a dude that is, even though I love what it sounds like, or master of sport, or I think I had Arjani Jernakov also on the podcast. The guys doing the belts and the shoes.
Yeah, I know personally all of them.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I mean, the kettlebell sphere in that regard is not that big. You probably also know. Always when I have so many names in my brain and then I forget these names. Svetlana Daniliuk.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right. So
Yeah.
so all these folks, it's not a big sphere, so you know these names, right? And at the end of the day, even though I like the sound of this title, the preparation for me sounds so maybe not boring, but maybe I'm not as an athlete as I should be in order to prepare for this. So I have my brain on my mind is wandering into different things like building my business and building a legacy. But let's jump to this point real quick. So what happened afterwards, right? I mean, you have come such a long way. So I would assume that you're still into kettlebell sport?
A little bit.
Okay. So, that sounds so funny for a person who has achieved this much, right? Saying, "Oh, I'm just a little bit in kettlebells," right? So what happened? What happened?
The politics. That's usually the issue. So in Slovenia, if I wanted to do certifications in Slovenia and had coaches like properly, not just give them some diplomas, I had to establish the Slovenian Gregors Sport Association. To establish this, you need 3 clubs. So I opened one club, and then we had 2 clubs, so we could do the association. And then we had to run this association for 2 years, so that we became officially recognized by the Olympic Committee of Slovenia.
Wow.
Yeah, in 2015,
that's big stuff.
Yeah, it was really big. In 2015, we were officially recognized by the Olympic Committee of Slovenia. And of course, I was the president, which I didn't really like because I'm not a person who want to run politics or stuff like this. I really want to be a coach and that's it. But at that point, I was the only reasonable solution because I was the only one who knew all the people. I spoke Russian, so when we went to...
Oh, you also spoke Russian? Wow.
Well, I was forced to because I went to lots of camps in Russia. I went to lots of competition in Russia. So
no English, my man. Hey.
Yeah, there's no English letters. So I had to...
Oh, the Cyrillic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Cyrillic. So
learn it.
Yeah, so and then it starts. You have to pay some money to the Olympic Committee, and then you have to pay some money to the bank. And then when I asked from the clubs for a little help, they were not really helpful. And then usually it starts, well, we're going to make another association. There's going to be another club. And I just say, okay, I'm going to resign as a president because I really don't want to play this stuff. I just want to do the Gregor sport. I want to have strong team. And I said, if anybody else thinks he can do it better, I just ask, please be president of this association and just run it fairly. And as soon as I stepped out, everybody stepped off. So I'm just saying there were things that were not really, I'm not proud that happened. And maybe I should do it a little bit different. But at the time I was still an athlete. So I wanted to compete at the same time. And I wanted to keep our association. I usually still say mine because it was me who created it. So yeah, it was my mistake. Part it was from people who wanted big piece of the cake sitting on my shoulders, holding their self tall. That was a little bit. And then you know how it is. There were many different ranking systems. There were many competitions. And it started to be like everybody was world champion. You just go on one competition and you're a world champion with 24 kilo kettlebells. So I was like, okay, I was training 10 years to get to the master of sports, and then somebody's training for 6 months calling himself world champion. It was kind of Like I wasn't happy about it. My athletes were training hard. I always pushed my athletes at least on 24s, and then for those who were talented, I wanted them to lift 32s because I say, look, if you want to be professional, just go heavy. But then there was a solution. You can just go for one competition when 24s were like enough for Master of Sports, and then people were getting Master of Sports with 24s. I couldn't stop it, so it was like
that's questionable. I mean, if you're lifting. If you have been lifting kettlebells for more than, let's say, like 2 months, and you've already progressed to working with double 24s, which already feel very heavy, and let's not even talk about the 10-minute set, just racking double 24s, right, and then jerking them and working with them. So I had to do for Steve Cotter's certification. The level 1 was not that hard. It was 100 hand-to-hand swings, 32 clean and jerks, and 60 snatches and 30 squats with a 20 in order to pass the CKT1 test, which I still think is an awesome workout as well. And then the CKT2 level was some sort of a biathlon. It was 40 jerks with double 20s, and then 100 snatches with a 20.
All right.
And I remember because something resonated when you said, I was pretty strong back then, and you already built the endurance. I think back in 2019, because I was also rather, let's say, like bodybuilding, powerlifting, more with heavy weights and lifting a lot of stuff, but I wasn't really used to kettlebells. I was able to muscle through these 40 jerks with catastrophic technique. And when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, how did I pull it off? But I think it was adrenaline, of course, because it was test, it was competition time, and I was strong enough, but it wasn't beautiful. But I managed to pull it off. So that's my, let's say, like my experience with competition. And then I recently did it again with double 20s, just a jerk. I've done both. I did both, 20 jerk and 100 snatch, and it felt more comfortable. But it was still a decent challenge, and I think I have gotten the hold of it to a certain extent for these exercises, when it comes to the ballistics especially.
Yeah.
And double 28s are already another beast. It's like, it's 8 kilos plus, so it's, oh my god. So the rack position's way heavier. Even if you have a solid body type, it's still heavy. And double 32s this is for people who don't know it. It's just a major difference. So I know that I could consider myself, if I was competing officially, as I think a CMS, right, with double 24s.
With 24s you can get to CMS level, yes.
Exactly. So I would not allow myself, or I would not allow anybody to call me any type of rank if I know if I'm supposed to get Master of Sport, and you did MSIC, right? Master of Sport International Class. So that's another level. And then you have Honored Master of Sport. Right?
So Honored Master of Sport, it's not a number. We can talk about this a little bit later.
Yeah, please share it. But the idea is you have to understand that there's just such a major weight difference, and you have to respect it. And if you're not able to pull it off, you're not supposed to call yourself this. It's just basics. If you haven't won the gold medal at the Olympics, you're not a gold medalist.
Yeah. Well, it's like, previous weekend there was a marathon in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. There's every year here in October. So yeah, if you go for a marathon, it's 42 kilometers. And then, of course, you have those versions for people who likes to do like half marathon. And you have for people who just want to go 10 kilometers. But, people still writing on Facebook, I ran a marathon. And then somewhere below they say it was fast 10K. So you didn't run a marathon. It was
that's
10K.
Not a marathon.
Yeah, it was the event. There was the event, but it was not a marathon. So yeah, it was the same with kettlebells. So why say you're a master of sports if you only ran 10 kilometers? So
exactly.
Maybe I was a little bit too much offended because I know how much hard work I put in.
100% with
you. Yeah, I didn't want those people to stand beside me and calling themselves tall. So maybe it was my mistake, but I'm not sorry that I did how I did it.
But there's still a certain pride attached to it if you know how much work or how much effort that went into the preparation. And now you think this guy or this gal next to you is shortcutting their way to success or their way to calling themselves a name. It's just like a PhD or a doctor's degree.
Exactly.
Right? I didn't go to university, so I don't have a PhD. I can't call myself doctor, right? I mean, I think there's even some universities who have honorates, right? Or honorates degree, something like that. That's still not a PhD. You still, or that's still not a doc for the European sense, right? That's still not a doctorate's degree. You haven't passed the test. You didn't go to university like this. You didn't study for 4 years. You didn't have to do a thesis. So you're not it. That's right, point blank.
That's a great example.
And if you want to do it, go to, sit into class and do it.
That's a great example.
And by the way, did you see the guy who, when it comes to marathons, did you see the guy who ran it in 2 hours and 6 minutes or something like this?
I mean, I used to run a lot, and I think I could run with him for like 500 meters.
And then he's like off.
I think he runs 20 and something kilometers per hour, 21. So I think I can hold this pace maybe for 500 meters if I warm up well.
Those are 15 years younger and stuff. But exactly. Imagine, I mean, 2 hours, and that's a pace. It's just like when I watch Markov or when I watch Khvostov, Alexander Khvostov. I wanted to have a podcast with him, which we have to repeat because the last time we tried it, he had some problems with some issues with Zoom, so we have to repeat it. So when I watch Khvostov, when he does 32 kg snatch, which look like it looks like a 16 when I do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he's picking up a 40, a 48, and then he attached some weights, and then it's a 56 something snatch. It's just amazing. I mean, what do you think? How much goes into preparation and how much goes into genetics? What's your point of view?
Well, for something like even Markov is doing now, there must be loads of genetics because in 2017, I met him in a camp in Russia. So he was still a young boy. I think he was like 18 or something. Or no, he was, something like 18, 19 years old. And I think I even beat him in this competition because I was I was in peak of my preparation at the time, peak of my form. And he was beginning. So it was small competition after the camp. But they told me, look, this guy's going to break world records. So for something like this, or for something like even Denisov is doing, or Anton Antonenko, or even Khvostov, there must be some genetics. But I know how hard those guys train. I was training with everybody. I was training, even Denisov was at my home for 14 days. Anton Antonenko was at my home for 14 days. And those 14 days, I was training with them, running in the morning, snatching afterwards, jerking in the evening, lifting weights, living the Russian style. So they do this for 15 years. You can say it's genetics, of course it is, but the commitment,
part of it,
the discipline, but commitment, the discipline, that's something it's amazing.
So,
I know how those guys train. I mean, I was in Omsk in Siberia with Anton Antonenko for 7 days, staying at his home and his house. And it was in the morning, minus 20 degrees. We went for a run. So it was cold, but he didn't care. So it was a run.
I love this. It was cold, but he didn't care.
No, he didn't care. I mean, you can dress up, so go for it.
Get some clothes on. Let's go.
Yeah.
You're gonna sweat anyway, so who cares? Wow, man. So
they run. It's like 10,000 of hours of training. I know with Anton, he's he trains 6 days a week. It's 3 times a week he's running and snatching afterwards, and then 3 times a week he's doing some sort of 2 kettlebell training, which I can talk a little bit later when you ask me where I would put Anton Antonenko among other coaches. So
please let me know how's this kind of preparation and what kind of training do these guys teach or engage in?
I know that I was never coached by Sergey Rudnov. Of course, I know of his system because we athletes share it a little bit, but I was never coached by him, so I cannot say for 100%. But he's really about technique. He wants technique. Every time you do a snatch set, he must send a video. Every time you do a jerk set, and then he's adjusting everything. He's really into details. With Denisov, he's big guy, strong guy with genetics of an elephant. I mean, his VO2 max is 56, which is not much absolutely, but you have to consider he's 115
Yeah,
kilos,
the body weight that he's
the
at.
body
Yeah.
weight.
My
So
God,
his lung
man.
capacity is over 7 liters.
Ah,
Yeah,
massive, man.
yeah, that's
Wow.
massive. And
Yeah.
training with him was always like it was always like a war. There was a competition. Yeah, every time we were in my gym, there is a video on Facebook and YouTube. We were competing head to head with this 2 minute challenge. With he was lifting 40s and I was lifting 32s, and we went head to head, and he won for one repetition, but he almost died at the end. And I know that if we would be tied, he would want to do it again. So with him, it was every time you go all out, you smash your body. So
Wow.
really, really hard. With Anasenko, on the other hand, I really liked it because it was lots of diversity. So he was just putting some swings in between my cleans. He was just doing some long cycle sets or just some clean sets, even though I was preparing for biathlon. So he just wanted me to be with kettlebells all the time. Just two kettlebells, just do whatever you want. Just combine five long cycle reps and 10 jerks, and then just add up 3 reps on the long cycle and 5 reps on the jerks. Just keep the kettlebells on your body. Your body must accept them, so they're part of you. And I really enjoyed this part of training. His style was for me was probably the best because I really like diversity, and every week there was something new. Let's say for Deniso, I knew exactly what's coming. I knew exactly with Fedorenko, it was really easy. With Deniso, it took me like 2 months and I already know how it's going to work. With Anasenko, I never figured it out. So he was always making small challenges, and he knew for every athlete, this is amazing, for every athlete, he knew what he can do on the competition with, let's say for me with 24 kilo kettlebells, he said, look, you can do 175 reps, and I did 173. He said you can do 118, and I did 120 with 32s. So he knew exactly by the number how much you can do on a given day.
How?
I don't know. He wrote every training down on a paper. He had everything about from every athlete, and
Wow. So Anasenko, right?
yeah, Anasenko.
Yeah.
And he's if you will have him on the podcast, I think he's one of the warmest person you will ever host.
Where can I find him?
At the moment, I can't find him because of the situation in Russia. So I haven't
Of
talked to
course.
him in over a year and a half. So I think you can reach him over WhatsApp. I know you cannot reach him over Instagram or Facebook anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. With when I ordered the belt from Argeni,
Yeah,
it wasn't a hassle, but he said there's some issues with PayPal,
of
and
course.
then Sergey Rudnev said he has to use a VPN in order to access his Instagram.
Yeah.
So here we go, politics again, right? For normal people, yeah. But that's another topic. So here's the thing. You were experiencing technique was Rudnev and Fedorenko, right?
Well, Fedorenko, no, the most about technique it was Rudnev because Rudnev was adjusting technique to your body type.
Yeah.
Let's say if I'm tall, long torso, short arms, so different technique for me than somebody with short torso, long arm, and he would adjust every training. For Deniso, it's like, look, you're gonna do like I do. You have to work like I do. You must work for me. So yeah, even if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but
you must work. You must work, my friend. I love this.
So Ivan was like this,
Yeah.
and Anton was something in between. So he didn't want to really adjust. He said, okay, you're gonna use a little faster pace with light kettlebells, or you're gonna go a little bit heavier and slower. So this was his adjustments. But with Rudnev, he was like really into details. You're gonna turn your palm like this, your pinky finger out, and yeah.
Wow. And Fedorenko, he was straightforward with volume.
Straightforward. 5 minutes every day. 5 minutes and just go faster. And you have to film every set. Maybe one day you will feel good and you will finish 10 minutes.
Okay. So you have technique, you have the war approach, you have variety, and you have the straightforward approach from Fedorenko. So my question, and Anasenko is something variety in between, something in between everything. So was Anasenko the only coach who wrote everything down?
No. I think that for Rudnev, for sure, he wrote everything down. For Deniso, I'm not sure because I never saw his program. He was always sending me. but I'm not sure. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
And do you think, just to interject, do you think there is it there must be a difference to a certain extent, because I think Ivan is still an athlete as well,
Yeah.
right? And while Sergey and Valery and Anton are, they maybe compete for fun or they go into the older divisions, but they're rather focused on teaching, right? Is there a difference, or do you think, hey, I can be an athlete, but I can also be a great coach?
Oh, yeah, that's a good topic. Good
Yeah.
question. Well, yeah, Deniso still wants to compete with kettlebells also, but he runs marathons. He do lots of running on skis, the
Yeah.
biathlon stuff. He also bought a road bike. He sent me a picture on the road bike. I feel sorry for this bike, but the road bikes are not meant for 115 kilos.
No. I love
Yeah.
this.
So he's
Awesome.
an athlete. He's all around athlete. He likes
Yeah.
to do other stuff. He likes to experiment.
Yeah.
For Anton, I think he will do. He will compete until he die. But he also runs marathons. He do other sports also. So I think they all compete. Maybe not on the highest level in kettlebell sport anymore, but they are all athletes by heart. So I think they will
Athletes by heart.
continue to
Love this.
compete, continue to impress. Let's say Rudnev is a little bit more into gymnastics. Deniso is into rowing. Anton is into running. So everybody has one other sport, because you cannot train kettlebells all year round. You need some time off, and during this time off, of course you need to do some sport, which is not too similar to kettlebell lifting.
Yeah, exactly. It makes so much sense the way I understand it. But let's just stick with this topic. So you have these coaches, right, or these different approaches. Do you see a common thread in all these different approaches?
Well, the goal is to do Master of Sports International class.
Okay, so the end goal is the common
end goal.
thread, but the way it's like, hey, there's different ways to roam, right? So that's probably it. Huh?
So with I can explain all this, like, the systems, not in detail because we don't have too much time. But let's say with the Deniso, you always start with light kettlebells in the training. Let's start with 16, you go to 20, and you finish training with 24s. And then you build until you can do 10-minute set with 20 kilos. Then you start with 20 kilos, you go 24th, and then you finish with 28 until you can finish with 24 kilos. And then you go 20 kilos, 24 for start, 28 and 32 until you can finish with 28. And then you get ready for competition with 32s. With Anton, it was, and they all start like 13 weeks before competition. They never want to write program if you don't have a competition plan. So yeah, it starts 13 weeks out. So for 12 weeks you train, for 1 week you taper, and then you peak at the competition. So
exactly.
This is how I coach. If somebody asks me if I can be his coach, I say, when it's your competition, and they say, oh, I just want to train for fun, then I say, yeah, have fun.
Have fun. But I'm not your trainer. That would be me then. That would be me. I'm the guy who trains people for fun.
It's not competition, but let's say if you say, I want to do 24 kilos in 13 weeks, and I can help you to increase your numbers, something like this.
Yeah, you have to have a time frame. Like, hey, on not something like, hey, well, I just want to try it out, but you have to say, hey, listen, in 13 weeks, yes, I want to be able to pull off double 24s, 10 minutes, right?
Yeah,
independent of whether you're competing or not, that's just my goal, right?
I mean, if you don't go for competition, you can always just skip it and say, okay, I'm not going to test. I don't feel okay, or I feel a little bit sick, which is normal. One day before competition, everybody feels a little bit sick. It's
of course, it's different.
It's normal, but it's not. I always had it. It's one story. When I was already Master of Sports International class, before every competition, before my jerk set, I was afraid when I will clean that my left kettlebell will fall out of my hands. Before I started the first rep, and once I cleaned, once I have rack position, okay, rack is done. I know I can do 100 reps now. But I was always afraid, if I'm going to pick them up, what if my left cap just falls off? I don't know why. But it was before every competition in my head.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
But there was a competition, and I was getting ready to it. I knew I had to rest. I knew I had to be mentally prepared.
Yes.
Carb loads and everything. And I had to cut weight for competition. So I took it seriously. So if I was training for 13 weeks, then the competition is the real deal.
Yes.
If there is no competition, then you can just go and try. But no.
It's not, let's say, like, it's not the same mental toughness that it requires because you're not actually stepping on stage. So
Exactly,
yeah,
and all the
there's a major
personal
difference.
records after some time are done on the competition. I mean, I could never come close to numbers I did on competition when I was training.
Yes, yeah, the
Never.
adrenaline, right? So everything,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
play.
you're rested. On competition day, you have to be rested. While you're training, you're never really rested. You know, you're training,
Yeah,
and then, of course, there is some super compensation, but you're still tired a little bit, and then you
yeah,
train and rest, and all
yeah.
the fatigue is adding up. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have this 1 week off,
Mm-hmm.
body gets ready, you just run a little bit, you get your
Yeah,
endurance, and
yeah.
then on competition you just go. So okay, back to Anton. With Anton, it was lots of running, much more cardiovascular training than with Denisov. And the training always started with 32s. So you did 32s, you came to 28s, and then it went down to 24s.
Oh.
And then there was a system, it's called Ryabchenko. You can write it down. So Ryabchenko system.
How do you
There's
spell that? How do you spell that?
RYB,
Mm-hmm.
something like Ryabchenko. I can then send it to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
But
Send it to me. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Please
I
do.
have the whole protocol down. It's exponential system. I really like it. So because in 3 weeks you really build up high, but then it's a huge deload, and you build up again, and a huge deload, and you build up
Interesting.
again. Yeah. I really like that system a lot. So when I'm training athletes, I'm using this system because out of 3 weeks, the first one is really easy. Second one is somewhat hard. The third one, it's really hard. But the third one, it's also almost like you're competing. So you're getting your body ready for competition and your mind also. And then you go down again. And 2 weeks are going to be a little bit harder, but not that hard. And then you go again. And so you repeat this 3 times, and then you go for the main competition.
It's like a taper system, right? So you go
Taper
up and you
system,
go
yeah.
down. Oh.
Yeah, but
And
let's say with the Ivan, it was more like steps system. So it was one step, another step, third step, and you go a little bit down. One step, third step, and a little bit down. And this Ryabchenko is exponential. It really goes like big waves, and you come down. So
wow.
that's what I really like.
And but still, all these systems can be fruitful, right? So
Yeah.
they
I
all
tried
give
all
you
of them.
results. Yeah.
Yeah, they all brought results to me. At one point, it was just like which I wanted to do more, so which I liked more. I think all the system would work, but I think if you're mentally not ready, the system, it doesn't matter how good the system is, if you're not mentally enjoying, even though it's hard, it's physically hard. Every system is physically hard once you get over master of sports level. There's loads of reps. It's like, I don't know, like 300-400 reps overhead with two kettlebells per week. And then like even more with one kettlebell, lots of running and jumping. So yeah, it gets hard, the fatigue adds up, but if you enjoy the process, then it's much easier than if you don't enjoy it. So
That's the thing. You have to. And you've mentioned this before. You have to have an athlete's heart. I think I'm assuming I don't have it. I think my heart is somewhere else. Just from the way I understand myself for this preparation thing. I mean, when I was preparing for the Steve Carter test, I was really into it and I loved it. But then after I did it, I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do this again. I don't. And I mean, really, it's like that. You have to have an athlete's heart, and if you have it, I think you're on track. And if you like kettlebells, most definitely. But I'm just, yeah, like I said, I'm more of a scientist. I want to find out every nook and cranny and learn anything that I can about kettlebells.
this was also with me. I mean, I wanted to understand what's going on. So I was searching for new ways, also how to train kettlebell sports. What assistant would it be? Why does Anton use those things that he
Yeah,
does? So I was
yeah,
writing everything down,
yeah.
reading books from, let's say, I was always comparing kettlebell lifting with rowing. And this was the mind shift that I did, and that helped me a lot because lots of people say the kettlebell is weightlifting sport, which is
Yes,
not. Kettlebell is cardiovascular sport.
yes, yes.
So the weight is just making you harder. It's like cycling uphill or rowing really fast. So you cannot say it's lifting weights because your heart rate goes up. You don't want to tense after every rep. And this is where it diverse the hard style from the Gregor sport.
Yeah, we
Because
have to talk about this too. Yeah, most definitely. Just
yeah,
writing it down. Yeah.
so that's the biggest difference. And if you once you start to understand that you're not just lifting 32 kilogram, but you're expressing power per minute, let's say. So if
Yes,
you're
you shared this in
lifting,
your book. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
no, yeah, so this is from the rowing. So if you're lifting 32 10 times a minute, you're lifting 640 kilograms overhead in 1 minute.
Yeah.
So 640 kilograms, if you go down to 24, so you have to lift them 15 times. So basically, if you're lifting 32s and 24s, 32s 10 reps per minute and 24s 15 reps per minute, you're lifting about the
The
same
same volume.
amount. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then I figured out, well, resting with 32s, it's like 3 seconds, and resting with 24s, it's only 2 seconds. So if you add up those seconds in rack position, you know that 32s are much heavier than 24s.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot just go mathematically. And this is a really big jump. So once I understood this, I understood that you have to go 24 and then slowly go up to 26 kilograms. And when I was in Russia, in St. Petersburg, in Sergei Rachinsky's gym, he has kettlebells from 6 kilos and then 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 44 kilograms by 1 kilo.
Singles, interesting.
A single. And then when I came home from this camp, I called my guy, my friend in Serbia, and I said, look, you're producing kettlebells and I want 7 kilo kettlebell, 9 kilo kettlebell, 11 kilo kettlebell. And now in my gym, I have 100 kettlebells from 6 to 20 kilos by 1 kilo, and then from 20 to 40 by 2 kilos. And then I have 44 and 50.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and those jumps are really small, and it's easy for the body, it's easy for the joints. It's much easier to progress with if you have small jumps in weights.
That's because that's kind of like a little bit the unforgiving nature of kettlebell training. It's like, hey, when you move up to the next weight, it's +4, and if it's doubles, it's +8.
Yeah,
I mean, this is tough. And I felt like, we're training normal people with kettlebells, and I felt like especially for women, the 2 kg increments are way better. From the 8 to the 10 to the 12 to the 14. Yeah. It's way better because the jumps are sometimes so tough in the system that they cannot handle it. The 8's too light, but the 12's then too tough, right?
Yeah, it's 50% increment.
Yeah, it's tough. So here's what I want to ask. You mentioned it in the conversation. Now, first of all, before I want to jump to this, here's what I know about preparation, and that's what I've learned from the Russian system by reading books and talking to these guys on the podcast. You have these preparation phases, right? So you have the GPP phase, you have the SPP phase, then you have the competitive phase and the post period. And these 4 phases are most of the time always incorporated into a preparation. And when you go through your mind, when you had these 4 coaches, was that the same? Was like, hey, we have GPP, then we have SPP, then we have competitive, and then we have post-competitive? Or was it like, hey, everybody had their own style and it all worked?
Well, with Anton, he wanted me to be without kettlebells, and the same with Deniso, without kettlebells during summer. So I was running or cycling or swimming or whatever I was doing. Just like 2 times a week, I was doing some snatches to keep my calluses on because I wanted thick skin on my palms for the preparation. Yeah, that's so that was it. So I was doing lots of runnings and other stuff. So with Anton, it was a little bit more running. With Deniso, it was a little bit more lifting weights. But then 13 weeks out, you start with kettlebells. So with Anton, it was always for the weights. He didn't pay too much attention. It was 4 sets of 10 squats. It was pull-ups, dips, and maybe some light deadlifts, something like this. So he didn't. So
that's some GPP, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was GPP.
Yeah.
Then for the SPP, it was lots of swings. So he didn't want me to do swing only, so he made me do like swing and snatch, or 2 swings and snatch, so I could really extend for 6 or 7 minutes per arm the 32s. With Ivan, it was different. So at first, like for first 3 weeks, there were lots of lifting weights and a little bit less kettlebells because the kettlebells were light. And then the closer I was to competition, the less there were lifting weights, the more there were lifting kettlebells and running. So yeah. But yeah, of course, those are professionals. This is just not something, well, let's try this. It's a professional plan. Those are professional coaches, and everything is like
yeah, and then you have to as an athlete, you have to have the required mindset to follow the program and then push through, right? It's not something where you can be like, hey, today I don't feel like it. Well, that doesn't
doesn't
work.
matter if I
Yeah,
didn't
that
like
doesn't
it.
matter. We still do it.
Yeah, that's
So,
perfect. Of
here's the thing. Do you know a guy named Thierry Sanchez?
course.
Oh, you're saying,
Yeah,
of
I met
course.
him
Awesome.
twice. I met him first time or three times. First time in Switzerland when I was doing the WKC, then second time I think in Germany, and then on one competition. He's Danish guy, yeah.
Ah, he's a Danish guy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Because
he's a Danish guy with a French name and a Spanish surname.
yeah, awesome,
Yeah.
international mix.
Yeah.
So I've also read his thesis, or he also had a book out, and or just a small. It's not a lot of pages. And do you know what book it was? Because I'm just pulling
No.
it up right now.
I think I had it. I think I read it also, but it's so long ago that I really can't remember.
All right, it's Kettlebell Sport and Athlete Preparation, yes, and it was 2009.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's at the beginning. So let me say like this: nobody of us didn't know anything about kettlebells at that time. So we read something, we learned something, and we were really, really smart because we didn't know how stupid we are. So
I love this. Yeah, and then you see these an old image from Denisov and stuff. But here's one thing that he says, which I think is fascinating. And you shared something, which was kind of similar in your book, if I recall it correctly. So let me just open it up and read this to you, and because we want to talk about a little bit about these physical qualities. So let me just search this phrase. So here he goes. He says. Kettlebell sport requires a special hybrid of strength endurance that is specific to the sport. The East Europeans call it special endurance. This is seen by many authorities as one of the main qualities of a Kettlebell. Strength endurance, as we define by conventional strength training, is not a guarantee of achieving good results. The duration of strength endurance exercises rarely goes over 3 minutes, and repetitions are continuous. And now he says, which I think is so interesting, just the basic gist of this is when you are lifting with kettlebells. You said it's a cardiovascular sport, and he's saying something like it requires some sort of special endurance. Where would you put it? Because it is not pure endurance, because that's running, rowing, cycling, cross country skiing. Even though rowing, like you mentioned, right? Rowing is a little bit similar, but with the kettlebell, which is so special, is you have a 70 kg body weight guy lifting. I mean, Johnny
oh yeah,
Benitez, right? What is this guy? 64, 65 something
yeah, but
kilogram?
he's really, really short. He's
Really,
really, really short.
really short, really small. But he also works with double 32. So you have,
Easy.
yeah, easy. So you have this small guy, right? In parentheses, you have this small guy lifting his body weight. If it's not 100%, let's say like 90% of his body weight, for 10 minutes straight, for let's say like 80 reps, long cycle, for
Oh,
example.
for him, I think he's 140 reps for Johnny Benitez. Yeah, that's the most amazing stuff. It's
Oh my
140
God,
or
man. What?
138.
So 140 reps, long cycle, 10 minutes,
No, no,
double?
no, it's jerk.
Jerk, right? So okay, jerk. So 140. So this is just crazy for just folks to understand. So what kind of physical quality is this? Because it goes against what we know, right? Endurance is this thing, strength is
Yeah.
this thing, but right? And
So
rowing is different as well, because
rowing
rowing
is a
you
little bit different. Yeah,
you
rowing
have
is a
the
little bit
resistance,
different.
but
Yeah.
you don't have resistance that you have to overcome, that is your body weight, and then do it for 10 minutes, right?
Well, I would say, of course, you build different types of muscle. Um, and that's very important why you have to start light. Because once you can lift kettlebells overhead and then you can position it, the lockout position, it's a little bit straight. So if you have a good lockout position, the kettlebells are not destroying your muscles, or you're not fatiguing your
Yes.
muscles, but they're on your
Yes.
skeleton. So your bones will
Exactly.
not get tired. So
Exactly.
when the Russian coaches are saying technique, that really is the like 80% of kettlebell lifting is technique. I'm not taking anything away from the physical preparation, but I know lots of guys who are much stronger than I am. I know lots of guys who have more endurance. I know lots of guys who have more endurance and are stronger than me, but they cannot come to 5% what I did with kettlebells. I'm not bragging it. This is just how it
Yeah,
is.
I understand it. I understand. And just to interject, Gregor, I had one guy. His name is Nikolai. He's producing these pro kettlebells.
Right?
The kettlebells with a special
Oh yeah, yeah.
surface. He just we just had an email conversation. Then, and I think once he replied to me via a video. He said a similar thing. He said, "Hey, kettlebells or kettlebell sport is 80% is a lot of technique," which I agree. But then he followed up with saying, "You can be out of shape, and if you have good technique, you can still pull it off."
Yeah, it's going to be a really extreme example, but let's say everybody knows LeBron James now.
Yeah.
He's much stronger than me. He has more endurance than me, but he cannot lift kettlebells. So, I mean, he cannot do many
Yeah, yeah,
reps.
yeah.
He probably lift them.
I get it. I get it. But
So,
would you say that you can be out of shape, not having trained for like, let's say like 1 year, and because I mean, technique is still solid, let's assume, and then you can still pull it off without the required fitness? Do you
well,
think?
pulled what off?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, right, yeah. But I mean, if you don't have, yes, we understand it's technique, but you still have to do, you still have to have the GPP, right? If you don't have this, or it's gone, but you still have the technique. Do you think you will be able to just, I don't know, what, 10-minute set with double 32s? Maybe not your big numbers, but do you think you could pull it off?
If I take the like 4 weeks of training, yes.
Yeah, but still, you need some prep, right, to
Yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
just the system back
And
up.
I'm training a lot. I'm training a lot. My endurance is high. My strength is a little bit low now. But let's say if I don't do anything for, I don't know, I can't imagine, but for 1 year, I will be able to do 10-minute set with 24 kilograms. No problem. No problem at all. Let's say if I go for jerk, I would be able to do 100. No problem at all. I think now that I'm not lifting since, what is this, for 4 years, I'm not doing double kettlebells.
Wow.
Yeah, for 4 years, I'm not doing double. I'm still doing snatches because sometimes I have to show on some seminars, so I don't want to be completely out of technique and shape.
Yes.
But if I use maybe 2 trainings just to get my body back to the rack position and overhead position, I can pull up 100 jerks with 24s without any preparation because still the technique is there.
So technique is the but I see this. I mean, I see it when I've done some reactionary content. I was reacting to I think it was a powerlifter. He was doing the Highland Games, and he almost died with a 24 kg Turkish getup.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
this guy's probably 3 times stronger than I am, and a 24 kg getup is like nothing for me. But because I understand the lockout position, I have good mobility, and I know I have to rack the weight on my frame and not on my muscle. So then, of course, I'm able to pull it off. That's why sometimes people, they're like, "How are you able to go into a windmill with the 32 kg kettlebell that destroys my muscle?" Yeah, because you're not racking it right, or your top fixation is off.
Exactly.
All right. So, but
So I would say the technique is first. Then, of course, you have to be strong enough to lift 32 kilogram kettlebells overhead. But if you can jerk them once and lock the perfect position and stand in this position, and if your rack position is good enough so you can at least relax your shoulders, if not the quads also, then you just need to build the endurance. It is special endurance, but the most scientific approach to this was by Ivan Denisov. So he was saying if you're going fast pace, then it's something completely different than if you're going slow pace, which is true. Now imagine if you want to come from point A to point B, if you walk normally with normal pace, you're not going to get too tired. But if you go like heavy walking, which means lunges, you will not be able to go for 10 minutes. So people who don't know how to lift kettlebells, who don't have proper technique, they are doing lunges for 10 minutes. And for us who know, we are just walking for 10 minutes. And if you're in good shape, then you're running. So this is the comparison that I would say. No technique for kettlebells is doing lunges. If you have good technique but you're out of shape, it's like a walk in a park. But if you're in a good shape, then there you're running. It's like cardiovascular training. Yeah.
And so it is, the cardiovascular part is big. How would you say how important is strength?
I would say strength is important, of course. But let's say I was lifting when my squat was 130 or maybe 140 kilos for 5-6 reps. I was never lifting heavy on the squat. I could do 120 jerks, and then when my squat was 180 kilos, I could do 120 jerks. So yeah, it didn't. So until some point, you have some diminishing returns.
Yes,
After
yes.
that point, it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Aha. And wow, this goes in line with what the Russians say, or with what this special kind of preparation from the Russian with the GPP, SPP, and competitive and post comp, that they say when you are building strength, and I think this comes from Yuri Verkhoshansky as well as Dr. Michael Yesses. I've had Dr. Mike Yesses on the podcast as well. He was the guy who translated Yuri Verkhoshansky's work. Yeah. And he said, strength, when you're building strength, there comes a time when you have to apply this type of strength into your sport. And if you don't do it, it's like you said, there's diminishing returns and you're wasting probably energy because you're now building this huge amount of strength, which doesn't correlate with the sport, right? So that's why you're probably, well, I'm able to pull off a 180 kilogram back squat. Yeah, but your jerk is still the same. So it's still a little bit different, right? Because you have, especially in the jerk, you have this explosive nature that isn't properly built if you're just very strong. It's one thing to lift a 200 kg deadlift or 250, whatever you want, whatever you call big numbers. But it's another thing to be able to demonstrate explosive strength or power, right? It's not the same.
Yeah, and when I was preparing for the competitions, I was not allowed to do bench press. I was not allowed to do any type of pressing. Yeah, because
Why?
press has nothing to do with jerk, really. Even the push press, Anton sometimes he said, okay, just you can do some push press, but with Ivan it was forbidden. Maybe some dips were allowed, but for the lockout position, for the triceps.
Yes.
But I had problems with my lockout, so he was just doing my legs. We were doing lots of those small jump squats with the bar on the back. Yeah, so this was the exercise. But once I was able to do some reps, then it was just like building the endurance. So the approach doesn't matter which approach it was like building VO2 max. So doing the VO2 max intervals. Intervals were between 3 to 5 minutes long with the short allowed half time or a little bit more. So let's say for 5 minutes set, you had 3 minutes of rest. And if you check the training for like VO2 max on the rower or the running, it's about the same. So yeah, it's building maximum aerobic power. So this is what I learned for the expression, the maximum aerobic power. So this is the maximum amount of power you can still produce while doing aerobically. Once you go anaerobically, you're done. So that's the minute number 10.
So there is, if we can translate it in very simple terms, it is explosive locomotion.
Yeah, exactly. But it has to be frequent enough. So if you're just doing like 6 reps per minute of jerk, it's not locomotion anymore because you're standing for too long and the muscles are tight for too long. And what happens to the heart muscle, if the muscle is tight for too long, the heart is not beating and the blood is flowing explosively into the heart.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the heart rate goes up, but it goes up anaerobically. So it's not the continuous work. So this
it doesn't build your endurance, right? That's one thing that I've learned from the cardio code from Dr. Kenneth Ch's book. I read it in 2 nights, 2 evenings.
I read it, I think 1 month ago. I read it when it came out, and I read it again like 2 months ago because it's such an amazing book.
So many scientific references where he's really bringing down or really driving home the point that you don't want to have a powerlifter's heart. And I love what he says. He says we are misunderstanding heart rate. Just because your heart rate is elevated doesn't mean you're building endurance. And then he follows up with saying, because if this was the case, I could scare you into shape.
Amazing. Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah,
there's so much quote. It's so much truth behind it. Man, this is good stuff. So if I understand it correctly, when it comes to the jerk, the reason why you're not supposed to build pressing strength is because if you do the jerk with solid technique, it becomes an explosive leg exercise.
Yeah, it's only leg exercise. The arms only can, because your triceps is not built for 10 minutes cardiovascular work. It's not possible. So you just want to jerk them overhead and then you catch, but you catch them on the straight arms.
Except you catch them with your bones.
Yeah, you catch them on your bones in the lockout position. So this is why flexibility is so important.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah,
and see, that's the reason. See, it makes so much sense. I love it when stuff makes sense. That's the reason why you see that the typical kettlebell sport athlete rather resembles a cyclist than a bodybuilder.
exactly. Yeah,
They have very strong legs, big quads, big glutes, but the upper. For example, when you look at Markov, you think this guy doesn't lift.
Yeah.
When you just see when he wears a shirt and the upper body, because it's not required. So he's not building muscle in the upper body.
Those muscles would be in a way. Those muscles are in the way because they're in the way of the rack position and they're in the way of using oxygen. So too much oxygen goes into the muscles in the upper body, which doesn't even help. So yeah, those muscles are in the way.
Makes so much sense, man. This is it's so fascinating. So on the final topic, Gregor, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, man. And if you're down, we have to do this again. But let me just stick to one thing, because you're a wealth of knowledge, and I have to uncover some of the Pandora's box right here. Because one thing I have to ask you first before I jump into this important topic that I have, and that is politics the only reason why you stopped picking up double kettlebells?
No. At some point, I posted it on Facebook the last time I was cleaning the closet.
Yeah. That Instagram post that I was referring to.
I found my card, Master of Sports Girevoy, Master of Sports International class. I was really, really training for this, but it happened. It's an amazing way how it happened. So to get Master of Sports World Class, it has to be done on World Championship or European Championship. You have to be on the podium, and you have to do the required number of reps for your body weight. So the story goes like this. I was getting ready for my competition in Ireland in 2015. And I signed in for under 85 kilograms. And I signed in April. The competition was in November. But I already had 2 kids. I didn't want to train so much anymore. It was nice summer. So I said, okay, I'm not going to lose weight. I'm just going to go 88 kilos. So I resigned for under 95, and I was accepted under 95. I was training, I was ready. The training was hard, but the diet was not. So I came to Ireland the one day prior to the competition. There was a waiting, and you always get this like a card when you write your body name, and everything was written for me under 95. And I weighted in 88.7 or 88.9 kilos. I think it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I went with my sister for a lunch. And in the evening at 6 or 7 o'clock, a friend of mine called me and he said, "Oh, there's a problem with your registration because you have to be under 85." So someone was complaining about me competing in 85, because I know who it was. I'm not going to say it, because he was afraid that if I'm going to be in 85, he's not going to get on the podium. And because he was closer to Russians than I was, they say, okay, either you're going to lose 4 kilos or you're disqualified. So at 8 o'clock in the evening, I started go to sauna, running, peeing, running again, went to sauna, running, peeing.
Water weight.
Yeah, and Anton Antonenko was coach of mine. He said, look, Gregor, you're going to run and pee all night. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go waiting, and you're going to be 85 minus. And I came in the morning, I was delusional. I couldn't even see anymore. I was completely dehydrated. I came on the scale, it was 85.4 or 5. So the judge said, no, you cannot compete. We said under 85. So I went for the toilet again. I was spitting whatever was left from my saliva. And then Anton came with the bottle of whiskey. He went into the judge's room. There were lots of screaming, lots of yelling, lots of Russian cursing. He came out and he said, look, you owe me 1 bottle of whiskey. You can compete. And it was 9 o'clock in the morning. My set was at 1 o'clock. So I went to, I had a breakfast. I had some coconut milk. I went to bed. I woke up. I had some meal. Went to bed again, and then I came to the platform at 1 o'clock. I didn't even realize what's going on, but I was so pissed that I did my record at the time, 116 reps with jerk, completely dehydrated, completely tired, but I did 116 reps. And it after 1.5 hours, it was already a snatch set, and I just went all out. I did only 158. So those were not really amazing numbers. I came out third on this competition, third or second, I'm not sure. I think it was third. I was on the podium. I didn't even think how many reps I did. I didn't even know. I was completely exhausted. And then I came home, and I got a call from Sergei Rachinsky. He said, "Oh, you were under 85, right?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I was under 85," because I was always calculating numbers under 95. He said, no, on that competition, because you lost so many weights, you were under 85. So your numbers, it was competition on the podium that makes you Master of Sports International class. Congratulations. I was like, oh, so he sent me the cards and it was officially. And at that point, I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to do something like this ever, ever, ever again. The preparation, it was not only 13 weeks, it was 6 years plus European Championship in May.
Yes.
Plus this World Championship. And I said, this was my last preparation. I'm just going to enjoy lifting kettlebells from now on. So I took like 14 days off. Then I went for another competition, the European Championship in Poland, but I didn't really prepare and I came out second on that competition. But it was like I was finishing my career at that time.
Wow. So what? That's a big story.
Yeah, so to answer the question, once I got the Master of Sports International class, I knew there was nowhere else to go as an athlete. I knew if there were Russian on the competition, I could never be first because they're so much stronger. And I knew if there were no Russians, I have those 2 or 3 rivals, which we were head to head, but we were friends. I didn't really care if I lose or not against them. We were just pushing each other to the limit. And once we reached those genetic potentials, I think I didn't see a point of destroying my body so much because those trainings were really, really heavy, mentally and physically, that I just say, okay, I'm going to enjoy kettlebells. Then later on, I did the long cycle, a few competitions. I did some charity competitions. So I just showed up on some competitions because at the time I was really popular. I was attracting people. So if I was invited, I just went without preparation. If I saw that I'm like the most powerful athlete there or the best athlete there, then I just did and performed the best I could. If there was somebody who was close to me, I was kind of helping him, lifting next to me, and then just put kettlebells down so he could beat me and do his personal record and stuff like this. So for 2 years, I was really enjoying being on the platform. It was always fun. I was even better person on competitions because before, when I was competing, I was not friendly. I was focused. I was not talking to anybody. Maybe sometimes I was arrogant. So sorry to everybody if I was. But
hey, that's the spirit. That's the focus. I mean, it's just like when you see these guys perform at their peak level. We can be friends afterwards, but when we compete, I want to eat you alive. That's what it is, man.
It was not so much. It was not so much beating other people than getting my numbers. The beauty of kettlebell sport is that you're not even. Sometimes, of course, there was some rivalry, and it was head to head. But I was beating my own numbers. This is what was important to me. So if I did personal record and some guy beat me, I was happy for him and I was happy for myself. If I came out first on some competition where there was not many good lifters and I underperformed, I was not happy. I was never happy with a medal. I was always happy with my performance. So, and I knew I cannot overperform the Master of Sports International class. I just knew it. So it was hard. It's a little bit of ego, but I knew it doesn't matter how much I train. I'm not getting any younger. I was already 34, 35 at the time. No, 36 at the time. And I just said, look, that's enough. I know I can still lift, I can show, I can teach. Maybe I can just improve as a coach, even though I was improving as a coach all the time when I was training. I just said, look, I'm not gonna do this again, and I'm not sorry what I did, but I'm not gonna train.
And there's no point, right? You've reached the peak, right?
I mean, I
And
could still go to competition. I could still be first or second where there was no Russian. I could be second or third where there was Russians. I miss the community, but the problem is that those competitions became expensive. So you had to travel, you had to sleep somewhere, so it became expensive.
yeah.
And and then there was only a couple of guys who were doing this. So we said, look, why would we go for a competition to pay for the competition fee, to be stressful? Let's just meet for a beer. So I went to
Most
Ireland. To Ireland. We did 2 or 3 trainings together. It was even better. We did trainings. We had so much fun. We went for a beer. We had good conversation. There was no rivalry, nothing. And then they came to my place. Then we went together to Hungary. So
Awesome.
the community was great. Yeah.
I think see that's one of the reasons why I don't see a point in competing in that regard, because it eats up so much of your time.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more you value your time.
Oh yeah.
Because that's one thing that you never get back, right? So it's just like when people ask me for, whatever we do, whether it's coaching sessions. I mean, I run a personal training business and focused on kettlebells, which works really well. We have online courses that we're selling. The YouTube channel is growing, so everything's really it's growing fast. But here's the thing: if you want my time, you have to pay.
Yeah.
Right. So and if I'm spending my time somewhere where I don't see a return on investment I have to be honest, from a monetary standpoint, then unless it's family and friends, of course, right, relationships and stuff, that's something else. But I don't see a point in preparing and competing for something where I have to pay and at the end I get nothing. Yeah. Or I just get, right. And you have to understand, we know this, right? Kettlebell sport or giveaway sport is such a fringe sport. It's not entertaining to watch somebody do 160 reps. Nobody's going to watch it, right? And recently somebody asked us, why is it not popular? Well, because it's not sexy. That's what it is, man.
It's too long.
Yeah. It's not interesting. It's not interesting to watch. If you're a freak and you love this stuff and you're technically very into it and you love kettlebells, but even I love kettlebells, and I'm not watching a 10-minute set.
I'm never watching it.
Right? I mean, if you're on the stage, it's something else. But I'd rather watch what I like watching is weightlifting, right? So one rep with these guys, 70 kg body weight lifting 160 kg clean jerk. That's fascinating. That takes me 30 seconds to watch. He either fails it or he does it. Right? Awesome. All right? Or boxing. This is action. So yeah, it's just
there's no action. Exactly. There's good word. There's no action in kettlebell.
No action. Yeah. That's why it'll always stay fringe. And what about injuries? Do you think if you train with weights like this for a very long time, is this detrimental to the body? And did you experience any injuries throughout your time?
The hardest injury, it was like blisters here.
Yeah. We all know this.
At the first, I was lifting too heavy, but I was lucky enough I didn't get injured when I was lifting 40 kilograms. Wow. But then when I got smarter, the only problem I would say, if you lack flexibility. If you lack flexibility, yes, then of course you will get injured sooner or later. But if you do the shoulder hygiene, the flexibility of shoulders, and then if you do the hip flexibility and the pelvic flexibility, then the injury is like when you run. At some time they will come to joint overuse. And it's same with kettlebells. I know that Anton Antonenko, whose technique is perfect, and he still sometimes have elbow injuries. Or not injury, just a little bit itching pain stuff, because lifting 32 overhead, there's a pressure on your elbow. So there were no injuries if you were lifting it correctly. Of course, you can get injured. It's very easy to get injured with any type of training. But if you do kettlebell sport correctly, if you hire one of the coaches that we mentioned in the beginning, they will help you to get through the process without getting injured.
There's a saying when it comes to injury, and I wonder what you think. They say, or at least I've heard it say, that injury only happens if load exceeds capacity. So the biggest, most important factor when it comes to injury is not your technique, but it's the load. For example, you can deadlift a 4 kg with the worst form ever, and it's not going to hurt. So my personal take on this is, of course, yes, it's true, but still technique plays a role. What would you say?
Well, I think, yeah, then it's still the load. But let's say with 4 kg on the deadlift, you will not get injured with 1 rep. But if you do it for 1,000 times, then you will. So even if you say, okay, I'm going to just snatch 16 kilo kettlebells because it's very light, but I'm going to do it with really bad technique or dangerous technique, eventually I will get injured. Mm-hmm. So yeah, technique. People sometimes underestimate the importance of technique when they're warming up or just lifting light weights or just doing deload week or just some like not really heavy and they're not focused on technique. I think every rep has to be done perfectly.
Mm-hmm. From my perspective, there's also, and we can finally, for the final point, we can also move a little bit into the RKC realm and tension and hardstyle and the comparison, because I'm interested, what do you think now with all your knowledge that you have when you compare to what you learned in the beginning? But when it comes to perfection of technique, I think sometimes we are, especially on social media and everywhere, it's kind of like a little bit, the emphasis on technique is sometimes so overblown that I'm thinking, man, especially when it comes to normal people who just want to train with kettlebells and they're having fun, it doesn't have to look like an athlete. So if you're not preparing, if you're not competing, it's not a big issue if it's a little bit off, right? You're not required to lift very heavy weights, and if you don't kill yourself with form breaking errors that are really bad for your body, then I don't think we have to. It's important to emphasize technique, but sometimes I feel it is a little bit exaggerated, and that's something that came especially from RKC and Strong First, where they were like these form generals, like, hey, if you don't do this, you are killing yourself. And this is kind of like the I think there's supposed to be a balance.
Well, I hope people know that what is the difference between RKC, which is kind of hard style, and kettlebell sport. I think that those things are not comparable. You cannot really compare, because it's like comparing apple to oranges. You can't, because RKC technique is perfect technique for what their goal is. So RKC has nothing to do with kettlebell lifting. They're using kettlebells to introduce you to tension, to introduce you to power, to explosiveness. But that's it. And I would say,
but may I interject real quick, Gregor? You're saying they're introducing you to tension, explosiveness, power. But that's exactly what you're building when you are long cycling and jerking, right? Isn't it the perfect expression of explosiveness, a solid jerk, than a hard style swing?
Yeah. Maybe I said it wrong. So they're teaching you tension and strength.
Okay.
Tension and strength, yeah, and then the power. Well, they still do snatch. But the way they snatch is you can change arms more often. So what I'm gonna like bite into this apple now.
Yeah, do it.
If you
because before you start, Gregor, I've had everybody, especially kettlebell sport athletes and folks of your caliber. I've asked everybody about their opinion. Because you see that RKC, Strong First, and kettlebell sport is so completely different that you sometimes ask yourself, bro, why are? And sometimes I even critiqued the way how Strong First, for example, does a clean jerk. Doesn't make no sense at all, right? Yeah. So that's why I'm always asking for these opinions.
So I started with RKC, and then I went to kettlebell sport because I was interested in Master of Sports title. If somebody comes to me and say, look, I want to train with kettlebells because I want to get fit, because I want to do this, because I want to play sport better, because I want to be more explosive, I will never, ever teach them Gregor sport technique. Never. Gregor sport technique is, I mean, you cannot say, okay, we're going to start with this technique and then I'm going to do just a little bit shift. You have to decide immediately. Either you want to go endurance, you want to focus and specialize in Gregor sport. So we're going to use kettlebells as a tool that's going to bring you to the competition and Master of Sports level. If this is not your goal, then please just go on the opposite side. If you want to do endurance, go for a run, row, whatever, cycle. don't do endurance with kettlebells unless that's your goal. That's your, I don't know, you want to do, that's your passion. But if you just want to get fit, then use the hardstyle technique because it's easier to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You can lift heavier weight. You can do high interval training. So you can do tabatas, you can do whatever kind of intervals. And you're going to get stronger quicker with that technique. I know that that's something that people don't want to hear, especially from me. But let's say I'm now a head coach, strength and conditioning for many other sports, for volleyball, for hockey, for handball. Do you think those guys would be better hockey players if they teach them how to do rack position, or how to do a soft style swing, or how to do snatch for 10 minutes with one arm? See, that's a different sport. So if you want to train somebody who is already in sport or who want to be better runner, just let him run and do the strength training with other tools. You can introduce kettlebells, but just don't go again copying what he's already doing. So that would be my suggestion. I'm training now over like 100 professional athletes in different sports, and I would never say, okay, let's go for 5-minute jerk set.
Yeah. We have to. Yeah. That makes total sense. In our case, because we specialized in kettlebell training for just normal people, we never do. Max what we do is 2 minutes of clean and press, and with one arm switch every rep.
Exactly.
Or snatch for 5 reps, right? And then you switch. So I don't see no value in destroying people with a 5-minute snatch set or 6 minute and then one arm switch, because then you are specializing into one particular niche of kettlebell training or kettlebell sport, where we say, hey, you only need this if you go there, right?
Exactly.
I get it. But here's where I differ a little bit. I do agree that we can build solid GPP with kettlebells, with a double front squat, with a double press, with farmer's walks, with clean and presses, even clean and jerks, and not this 10-minute stuff, right? Just a solid clean and jerk for, let's say, like 10 reps, and you switch sides after 5 reps with a 24-28. That's some solid strength work. Encapsulate some endurance, everything. I always say the kettlebell touches all bases of human performance or human physical qualities.
That's
right. But here's where I sometimes differ is, while we can do deadlifts, press, and squat and all these grinds with the kettlebell, to me it doesn't make sense to do a ballistic movement the way the hardstyle and RKC guys teach it. Because they teach so much tension.
Yeah.
Where I am saying, listen, if we work with momentum, we have to use an efficient path. Look at the weightlifting guys. This is heavy weight, but they have to follow the most efficient bar path. They have to properly display explosiveness. And if we go even a little bit deeper into explosiveness, we know that if your muscle doesn't act in between 0 and 1.5 seconds, it's not explosive training. So what would be the best thing to do explosive training? It would be depth jumps, if you listen to Yuri Verkhoshansky, for example, right? And so I don't see it. I don't see this tension work when it comes to ballistics. That's the only difference, where I don't understand why not a snatch? Because a snatch is you're moving the weight ballistically.
Let's say it like this. Once I learned how to do the technique as a girevoy sport athlete, I can grab 64 kilo kettlebell, that's the heaviest I have, and I can do snatches with it.
Wow.
But I cannot do the same technique that I would use for 10-minute set.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So the technique, of course, will be a little bit. And if you see me, there are videos on YouTube, on Facebook, probably me doing, I don't know, 20 snatches with 57 kilo kettlebells. But you would say, yeah, that's hard style. Of course, it's hard style. It's 57 kilos. So I have to squat down and explosively pull up. So why I would not say that?
Okay.
You understand that?
I get what you're saying.
24 kilos. Of course, it's explosive. It flies up.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna use just enough energy that I will lift 24 kilograms. And if you want to build pure explosiveness, you must use all your energy. So you have to go really heavy. And if you use 24 kilo kettlebell, I don't want to insult anybody, but that's not heavy.
Yeah.
So
Get what I'm
with
saying.
24 kilograms, it's very hard to build maximum explosiveness. So if you want to build explosiveness, let's say jump squats, you're going to use about 30% of your squat, right? If you want to use explosiveness with your deadlift, you're going to use about 30% of your maximum deadlift. But how can you do explosive deadlift? It's a swing. So let's say you can pull 200 kilos off the floor. Explosive deadlifts, it's like 70 kilos then. So if you have 70 kilo kettlebell, then you can train explosive power with it. And explosive power, you will have to train on the hard style fashion. So you will have to tense your body because it's going to be ballistically down, explosive up.
Yes.
So,
but don't you think because when, and I've read this through the books from Yuri Verkhoshansky, and also if you listen to the late Louis Simmons from Westside Barbell, who always teaches this 1.5 second rule.
Yeah.
If you are not achieving this quick reaction of the muscle fiber, it's not explosive training. And you are not able to reach that speed with a swing. Doesn't matter how heavy it is. And I would even say the heavier the kettlebell gets, the longer it takes for your muscles to push, to pull, to pump the weight back once it lands in the backswing. Because it's so heavy. So gravity, right? It's pulling everything down. You're squatting. You're never that fast. And so if you're not,
Yeah. Then there's usually it starts with the swing when you go hard style or soft style.
Yeah.
It never goes further than that. So what is the goal of the swing hard style, and what is the goal of the swing when you do the Gregor sport style swing? If you let go, let's say I perform swing with 64 kilograms, the hard style. And if I'm gonna
me too. Yeah.
I can do both styles with 40. Let's just say 40 kilos.
Yeah.
I can do both styles. So if I go hard style and I'm gonna drop the handle on the top, the kettlebell is gonna fly forward because I'm pushing forward, so I'm developing forward force. If I'm gonna do the Gregor sport style swing and I'm gonna drop the handle at the top, the kettlebell will stay in the same spot and I'm gonna catch it again. When you're doing hard style, you start swing when the kettlebell is behind your body.
Yes.
So you load your hamstrings and you push forward.
Yes.
Okay. When you do it correctly, let's say that with the Gregor sport style, you have to wait until the
kettlebell. Exactly. Yeah. It's softer. Yeah, we know that. Yeah.
But once the kettlebell passes your knees, you load your quads and then you stand up. So it's a completely different thing. It's very hard to compare to which one is better, which one is more explosive, because explosiveness on the hard style, it starts in the back. Explosiveness in the kettlebell sport style starts in the front of your body. And I think you're using just like this momentum to pull the kettlebell. It's just the direction of force. On the hard style, it goes forward. On the kettlebell sport style, it goes backward.
But here's a funny thing, Gregor. I had a physiotherapist and an exercise scientist on. His name is Neil May.
Okay.
And he's from Australia. And he did a study. It was called the Bell Trial. It was an interesting study. Long story short, he was looking for older people, 59 to 79 years of age. He was doing 6 weeks of kettlebell training, and he wanted to see how they improve. That's one of the parts of the Bell Trial. But here's another interesting, fascinating story. He said he was doing a 16 kg and I think a 40 and a 50 kg swing. And he was measuring the force, the ground force reaction.
Oh, yeah.
And here's what he found out. And he's total hard style. He only does hard style. He said, you know how much forward force was in the swing? I said, no, I don't know. He said, less than 10%.
On the hard style?
Yes. He said, everything is vertical force.
Okay.
And I said, well, that's with a 16 kg. He said, yes. With the 15 kg, it was even less.
Really?
I'll have to send you the video. So that's data. That's why I hear all these talking points around these two styles, right? Around these two ideas. And of course, I always differentiated. I've learned this from Sean Mosen. I always differentiated into either I want to build high tension or I want to build high volume, right? So strength or endurance.
Yeah.
just to put it bluntly, or very easy to, it's cut and dry. But at the end of the day, I would assume that if we put two folks, and I've said this a couple of times on this podcast, if we would put two guys together, one guy is the hardstyle snatch guy, and the other guy is the giveaway snatch guy, at the end of, let's say, like 30 days, I would assume the difference is probably not that big. Because it's touted that this extreme application of tension in the hardstyle realm builds explosive force. And I'm assuming that based upon what we know when it comes to explosive force, it's not enough time to build true explosive power. Yeah. And so the kettlebell flies up, not forward. So again, we have a difference there. So my assumption would be that the difference is probably maybe 5% or 2%. And if you're chasing these 2%, I got you. But for most cases, and here's the reason why I'm saying this, it doesn't make sense to tense your body that hard if there isn't a major difference at the end when it comes to the snatch. Of course, you have to tense your body like crazy if you want to pull 200 kgs off the floor. Of course. You cannot slouch, right? You have to build tension and you have to make everything strong. But here's the major difference between a 200 kilogram deadlift and running. We understand it. Yeah. But in kettlebells, I think the difference is not that big. I think it's rather a marketing gig.
Yeah, I was always saying, if you want to be really explosive, like you have to lift heavier kettlebell. You cannot build explosiveness with very light kettlebell because you know that explosiveness is how fast you can move.
Exactly.
You have to move a certain weight.
Yes.
If you look at the strength curve at about 33%, you can still move at the natural speed of your joint. And if you keep adding weight above 33 to maybe 40%, your speed of the movement, the angular speed of your joint will be the same. After that, the speed of your joint will slowly come down. So you're building, you're adding weight, the speed comes down, so the curve slowly goes down to less force. So yeah, I was never really thinking about what you explained into such details. But as I mentioned, if I train, let's say, other athletes, not giveaway sport athletes, then I'm just teaching them to not to tense, but to go heavy. Let's say like this. So go heavy. Yeah, maybe not to tense. Maybe the tension was the wrong expression.
And see, that's the reason why I'm getting there. Because when you look at all these professionals when they prepare, and when you read through the Russian literature when it comes to the sports performance, very rarely do they mention kettlebells. Oftentimes, what I see all the time is squats. Squats, barbell squats. I see this almost every athlete does them.
You know where the kettlebells are mentioned in the Verkhoshansky's book? Jumps on the squat.
Jump squats. That's it. I was because I got into Yuri Verkhoshansky because Pavel was talking about him, right? So Dr. Yuri, blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, wow, this guy's this. And I read 2 of his books, didn't understand a word, right? So it's so tough to understand what he says. I think it's so sports science specific, right? You have to be a nerd to understand this. But it was a great experience reading through it and not understanding anything. And then I was like, okay, where's the kettlebell stuff? And I'm skimming through the book, and then I see, kettlebell squat jumps.
Yeah, 4 sets of 10.
That's it. So I'm like, and here's the thing where I'm like, okay, everybody or people. I mean, we know now that we know more about the kettlebell. We know it has USP. It has a USP. It is a great tool for let's say like 99% of the population who are not athletes, who just want to get in better shape. It touches on endurance, some strength, some explosiveness. It's easy. Doesn't you have to go that much out of your comfort zone to lift it? You just need a lot of you don't need a lot of space. So all these powerful benefits. But when it comes to sports and athletic performance, I would assume that kettlebells don't play a huge role.
No. This is one of the reasons why I put most of my kettlebell stuff off when I write CVs or when I introduce myself, because at some point it was when I was assigned to a Handball National Association as a strength coach, they were all saying, oh, now we're going to lift kettlebells. I'm like, no, you're not going to lift kettlebells. And they were like, well, so why are you so special then? I was like, I don't know. I mean, this
Why
was
you're
me.
so
I was
special then?
lifting, yeah, I was lifting kettlebells, but my
Yes.
knowledge goes way above that, lifting
Uh-huh.
kettlebells only. So yeah, this is why I'm cleared all the titles when I introduce myself. I never say master of sports anymore because I was master of sports in kettlebell sport. I'm not master of sports in any other sport, so I'm just a coach,
Mm-hmm.
strength and conditioning coach, and this is
Mm-hmm.
really my profession. And so
Mm-hmm.
kettlebells was my passion, but that's my profession.
Ah, so
So
there's a
it went
difference.
hand in hand for some time. I
Yeah.
have kettlebells in my gym. I
Yeah.
use them for swings. I use them for jump squats from Yuri
Yeah.
Verkhoshansky.
Mm-hmm.
When I train athletes, um, I use them in group trainings. We have group
Yeah.
trainings like
Yeah.
kettlebell fitness stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
So when you
course.
you will change hands for 8 minutes,
Yeah. It's all. Yeah. It's
change
awesome. It's cool
exercises,
stuff.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for professional athletes, I don't go above 5 reps. So we go swings for activation. We do some
Mm-hmm.
jump squats for or post activation or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, otherwise we leave barbells, we jump, we do lunges, we do everything as a like normal coaches do.
And see, isn't it funny that we're always looking for the magic trick or the magic hack when at the end of the day, Bulgarian squats or this type of squat or that type of squat. And when you talk to these weightlifting folks, which I've also had on the podcast, or you read these books, it's just squats, man. It's just put barbells on your back, or you do jump squats, right? Or lunges, right? The basic exercises which athletes have used or coaches have distributed since forever
Yeah,
are the ones that work and build your GPP the most,
the
right?
most. I was in when I finished with kettlebells. Mikhail Kotlyaev. He was one of the strongest men in the world. He
Mm-hmm.
was also in my place. I always invite coaches to my home because I want to meet them personally. So he was staying for 4 days in my home. He broke my Zofa because he was 168 kilos at the time. And
My God.
yeah, yeah, but he was like lifting
Wow.
360 kilos in my gym
Yeah. Yeah.
on a deadlift.
Wow.
So
Wow. That's massive.
he invited me to Russia into Chekhov. There was a cross lifting camp. There was a Dmitry Klokov, the
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. The
So he
legend.
was there, and then was Dmitry Beresto, the Olympic gold medalist in weightlifting. So I met all those guys. We were training for 10 days, and after 10 days, I asked, "So Dmitry, what do you think I'm training? Volleyball players. What they need to do to be better?" And he said, "Well, let them play volleyball." And I said, "Yeah, but what would you do? The snatch, or do they get more explosive?" He said, "No. You build explosiveness with jumps and squats, and you build technique with snatch. So for athletes, don't use kettlebell, don't use Olympic lifts." And they're such a benchmark, but the more I think about it, and he said, "No, don't do cleans, don't do snatches, don't do jerks with your athletes. Those are techniques, because they don't say it's an exercise, it's a technique. So snatch is a technique, jerk is a technique, and clean is a technique. So they're training techniques, but they're building strength and explosive power with basic exercises like jumps, deadlifts, and squats, and that's it. Of course, they're lifting heavy, but the trainings of the snatch is just improving technique, like with kettlebells. You're improving your technique. You're using kettlebells to improve your technique. Every repetition is improving your technique. The better you are, the heavier you can lift, and the faster you can go. But you're still improving your technique. But building endurance, Anton made me run 2 times per week for 45 minutes, 2 times per week for 1 hour. He made me run, and upon that, I had to do snatch. So he said,
It's,
"You're gonna build your endurance with running."
yes,
With
yes,
kettlebell."
yeah. What Dr. Kenneth, all right? What
Yeah,
the cardio code? It's
cardio
this,
code.
man. Build locomotion.
Motion,
That's
yeah.
it. You cannot come. I would maybe say that after reading his book, I would argue that maybe a kettlebell sports snatch set with a lighter kettlebell, like maybe let's say like 16 or 20, for a half marathon, could maybe come close to some locomotion like rowing or running or
Yeah.
cross country skiing, right? But I love how he explains this relationship between tension and the perforation of the muscles and the heart wall and everything. But I love it. I mean, Dmitry Klokov says, "Hey man, it's squats, it's jumps and squats. That's it. There you go."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I wanted to know the secret, and he said no, it's too
There's
much
no
technique.
secret.
Yeah, they say everybody wants to know the Russian secret.
Yeah, the Russian secret, right? And yeah, and Pavel capitalized on it. The Russian secret.
Yeah,
You're on
but
Soviet territory now.
yeah, but the secret is in training. You have to train. There is no. I think
Yeah.
there, of course, there are some secrets. Then once you're at your genetic potential, of course, you have to
Yes.
play and stuff. But
Yes.
the secret is in discipline.
But here's the thing. When I was talking to Dr. Michael Yeses, he said that I love how Klokov says it. He says just let them play volleyball, right? So Dr. Michael Yeses would say, let them play, but have a biomechanist analyze their movements,
Of course.
and then have them get together, and then teach them what kind of movement patterns they have to improve from a biomechanical level. Like for running, for example. I always thought running is just simple, right? It's right, boom, 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 boom. But he says, no. There's a paw back. When you lift the leg, blah, blah, blah. It's all this technique that goes into it. And then in his book, he lays it out with images where you can really see it. Like you see, this is perfect. Perfect technique is when one leg lands, the other leg is like, when one leg lands and the other leg gets ready for the extension, you should see that from the side it looks like there's only one leg. For example, that's perfect technique. So this is where he comes from. He says, yes, you can always improve every athlete from a biomechanical perspective, from his athletic performance, the way he does the sports motion, the sports movement.
Yeah.
Right, and this is what I understand, at least from that perspective. But there is no secret when it comes to building, for example, GPP. It's always these basic exercises. But still, what do you make out of this? That so many people say there's this kettlebell effect, or the what the hell effect. I'm doing swings, and all of a sudden my deadlift goes up, or I'm doing this, and all of a sudden that. What do you think is behind this?
Well, for somebody who did nothing and starts training, I mean, even if he would lifting like a bag of potatoes, he would get
Yes,
stronger.
exactly.
So that's for the guys who never did anything. Whatever you do at the beginning, you're gonna improve.
Exactly.
I think for those people who improve, let's say the power lifters who improve their deadlift because he starts using swing, is just because he rested a little bit from the deadlifts. Let's say if you know of course you read the West Side Barbell from Louis Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, let's not bench for some time. Let's just do
Yes.
let's just do triceps, something else, and then you come back to
Yes.
bench press and you're stronger.
Yes.
Or the late Charles Poliquin.
Yeah.
He said if you're going to improve your external rotation, your bench press will go up. You know, he has this. Do you know how the protocol goes for the strength sensei?
From Charles Poliquin, I don't know,
Charles Poliquin.
but I know
he said
it.
if your bench press is 100 kilos, then you have
Yep.
to be able to lift 9.2% of external rotation for 8 repetitions. If you cannot these, then your external rotators are not strong enough to support your shoulders on the bench press.
Okay.
There's a big possibility you will get injured, and because the muscle in the back is not strong,
Okay.
the muscle in the front cannot produce force.
Okay.
So then you increase the strength in the back muscles and your bench press improves.
Yes.
Those are tricks, of course, those are tricks.
Yes.
But I think if you want to get really strong, you have to practice that movement. I really like one of the best coaches I ever met in person. It was 2 times in person, was Pavel Tsatsouline. He's the most knowledgeable coach.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the most, which I met in person, and I met lots of coaches in person.
Wow.
And he's talking so simple. He doesn't overcomplicate anything. Even his books are so straightforward.
Yeah. And his writing style is captivating. And it makes so much. He also makes a lot of sense. Even though I sometimes I intentionally do this because sometimes what I've learned on my YouTube channel is when I involve his name in the title, the views always go up.
Yeah,
so sometimes I mention him and I say some funny stuff, right? But at the end of the day, that's interesting to hear, right? Wow.
Yeah. Well, he was the first author which I read from, but then because I came to United States, I was one of the 2 European guys who came to United States.
To Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm.
So there was in Minnesota. So he immediately we related a little bit better. And then he invited me to Denmark, and then we spent some time together there. And I think he really knows so much. And I really like with him, he doesn't overcomplicate.
Yeah.
It's 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets, 3 basic exercises. You continue to this, you will get stronger. Of course, there are then a little bit assistant, loading, deloading, everything this. But for 80% of people, for 80% of the time, if you just follow his program, you will get stronger.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
It's just what when you start then reading Dr. Yuri Verkhoshansky's work and these sports scientists, then it goes into, they take it to the moon. But then I think it is a system that is only reserved for high level athletes that have really peaked, and now it is time to really go into the minute details and see what we can find, if we can improve maybe a couple of percent in that regard.
That was with me when I read all the Verkhoshansky's book, and even some books from Russia, from Platonov. It's in Russian, 700 pages book.
Yeah.
Those are so many details, and what I wanted to do is to train everybody according to those books, and I was overcomplicating.
Yes.
It was too much, so I couldn't really gather together what's important in those books. So now that I have the knowledge from those books, from those authors, from those coaches, I know I can use it when I need to. But I'm using 80% of what Pavel says all the time now. So it's 80% the basics, the base cycles, just get stronger. And then when you see that somebody has some issues with progression, then you can add a little bit tricks, and then you pull out again, and then you add from the other side. So you're just adding small, like salt and pepper on your big dish that you have in front of you. So you don't start with salt and pepper, but you start with a big dish and then slowly add if you need something. And what I did, I know I overcomplicated. I was all the percentages for everybody. But at some point, I started to understand that if you have an athlete who trains 2 times per day, who have 2 competitions or 2 games per week, you cannot go, okay, today we're going to do 78%. No, he's tired today. Maybe 78 is going to be just too heavy. So you just say, okay, 3 to 5 reps until you feel strong. And since I started doing this, I have so much free time, and athletes are so much happier.
Yes. And I think you also have to factor in, for example, if you have, I've watched the documentary, what was it called? Red Wings or Red Army, from this legendary Soviet hockey team. That was dominating. They were dominating the sports. And the Olympics, and then they were kind of scattered, everything broke down, and then these guys reunited in the Philadelphia Flyers or something like this, and then they were crushing it because they had this kind of, I love this hive mind mentality. They were training with each other for so long, and they said something like they were pissing blood and they were vomiting because training was so tough back under the Soviet regime. But it was like, hey, it was completely different. And in that regard, I think you have to understand what kind of athlete do you have, and what incentive is in the sport of the athlete. If you train a Ronaldo or a Messi, where millions of dollars is behind it, and they want to win championships that make them millions and millions, and you have an asset that is worth millions, of course, you want to use every single rule in the book that you know to tweak and make them maybe an inch faster or an inch stronger, right? Applicable to the sport. But I think for most athletes or for most people, it's just not something that they have to apply, right?
Exactly. For me, it was a big challenge for me because, like I said, I work in volleyball, hockey, handball, and I was really overcomplicating. But as you mentioned, you have to build like 80% of the system is very simple, and the same for all athletes and maybe even all sports. I know for volleyball, you don't need endurance too much. Of course, you need to be able to stay awake for 3 hours as long as the game is. That's about it. And for hockey, you need a little different endurance, and for handball. But okay, let's go for strength. Every athlete needs to be stronger. So in volleyball, if you're going to have stronger legs, you're going to jump higher. Of course, you have to convert it into explosiveness later. In handball, if you're stronger, you're going to jump higher, you're going to run faster, and you're going to tackle stronger. In hockey, if you're stronger, you're going to skate faster, you're going to tackle stronger. So strength is related to all those sports. And you're not going to build this strength different. So it's not going to be hockey squat handball squat or volleyball squat.
Oh, you can
No,
make money with this.
oh yeah,
It's the
business
hockey
idea.
squat. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, it is a
marketing gig.
squat.
Yeah, it's a
Okay, so
squat.
hockey players have a little bit different position of squatting because they skate a lot, so their hips a little bit. And but yeah, but they will adjust squat technique to skating. You will not adjust their skating technique to squatting. And I think that's very important what coaches do. They say, okay, we're gonna squat perfectly. Doesn't matter your body type. I want you to go ass to the grass, knees out. No, 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 no. If you have 2 meter tall athlete, you don't want them to go ass to the grass. You're just gonna use box. That's enough. If you want to do the full knee flexion, you're gonna use lunges or you're gonna use front foot elevated squat.
Why, can you explain why you wouldn't have a large? One thing I understand, a tall person, as most of the time they are limited in their mobility to a certain extent in their hips. But what would be the other reason why you wouldn't have a tall athlete go down ATG if he could?
Oh, if he can, then I would. At some point, I would do it. Like off season, I like my athletes to improve their mobility, especially on the back squat. So if I can improve them to go closer as to the grass, that's or ATG, it's okay. It's okay for me. But the most force you produce at about 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
And the tall athletes, their leverages are so long. So the leverage
exactly.
And then I just say, look, if you want to do the full knee flexion, because why you do squat? You want to do explosive power. So you want to really build power from the position or a little bit lower that you're going to use it in your game. But you want to have safe joints because you will never produce power from the full squat, playing handball, playing volleyball. It's always from the half squat or a little bit less. So if I want to protect the joint, I want to do the full range of motion. I will go, the guy knees over toes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing for your knees. That's amazing for your hips. You're doing the full knee flexion. You're doing the full hip flexion without straining too much on your lower back. I don't think that everybody is ready for heavy ATG squats. Or I don't think that every athlete needs it or that he would improve from going ATG. That's my point. So during the season, I never make my athletes do squat. I always make them do box squats up to the knee level. So the athletes who are tall, they're gonna use 70 centimeter box. Athletes who are short, they're gonna use 50 centimeter box. So I want them to squat from where they can produce the most power. So that's in season. There's another reason why I use box squats because I don't want them to be too much time under tension on the way down. On the squat only. This is not. I'm not escaping the time under tension. I just want them to come fast, control to the position from where they will push. So I really use squat for strength production, for force production only, and I use the assistant exercises to be like prevention, injury prevention stuff, or just like building muscle symmetry. I use unilateral stuff most of the time, and then on the unilateral stuff, I go full range of motion.
Interesting. Man, that's why I love having these podcasts because I had a guy on. His name is Andrew Charniga, and he is a weightlifting scientist. He did weightlifting for like 40 years and then became a coach and stuff. And he has a blog that's called Sportivni Press. And so I have to send it to you because I talked to him and he was like, if you don't make an athlete, if an athlete is doing quarter squats, you're playing God. I'm saying why? He says because the knee is supposed to go into full flexion because there's a so-called wrapping effect. I looked it up. I said, ooh, there really is. Then he said the biggest pressure on the knee is at 90-degree angle. And as soon as you go down, so the hip goes down to the floor, the pressure is gone. Yeah. And he says, if you don't squat down, he said there's something like, 16 bones in the ankle joint or something like this, or even more. If you don't squat down as far as you can, then these bones never get to work. So you are limiting flexion and you're limiting movement. And I said, okay, so what's the gist of it? He said, here's the thing. The reason why soccer players, football players, and NBA players are always injured is because they're not doing an ATG squat. And I said, why? He said, and it's interesting. He said, because they're building so-called internal resistance. And I said, what is internal resistance? He said, there's two kinds of internal resistance. The first one is the natural one. So for example, if I extend my arm, my biceps is making sure that I don't break my elbow, right? So this is natural resistance. This is good. But the other type of internal resistance is if you don't allow full bending or flexion. And then what happens is when the athlete trips or falls or whatever happens, then what happens is the joint goes into immediate full flexion, and because it's not used to it, it's going to break. So this internal resistance that builds up then explodes in the joint, and there you have an injury.
Yeah, I agree completely, and this is why I use all the unilateral stuff in the full range of motion. So the lunge, I do the front foot elevated stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you really push your knee
really
forward.
Push it. Yeah.
So I think, if he's a scientist, I would never go argue. I could talk to him, and I would explain my thesis to him, and I would love to listen or to hear what he has to say. And I agree completely. If you don't train the full range of motion, you're just asking for injury. So this is why I'm using the whole range of motion, but unilaterally, because I think on the squat, there's another thing. Let's say I get athletes when they're 22, 23, and they were never doing deep squats. And if I come to the club and I say, okay, guys, this season we're going to start deep squats, probably they're going to take the light out and beat the shit out of me. But I say, okay, we're gonna keep your squats because I know you feel confident and you feel strong in your range of motion. Some guys are doing ATG, some guys not. But what I add is full range of motion on the system exercises. So this is what I add slowly.
Yeah. To slowly move them into this full range.
And off season, I say off season we're gonna deload. We're gonna go really light, and I want you to go as deep as you can. So off season, I try to make it.
Yes, and I think there's a big point to make when you're going into full flexion ATG with heavy weight. If you're not a weightlifter, probably you have no business of packing that heavy weight on your back, right?
This is what I think also.
Yeah, I feel it. I wasn't in my life. I wasn't very strong. So my max squat was something like maybe 120 or 30 or something, but never ATG. Just down maybe to half squat and then back up, right? And now since I've started incorporating this idea of never limiting flexion, I am just using way less weight on the back squat, but I go as far down as I can. And with our clients, just normal people, we do this as well. It's like, hey, the idea is don't limit bending. And then you have some people, they are limited. And some people, I think it's mentally. Then we have other people with artificial joints. That's another story. And then you have people who are just, they lack the mobility. And then I always say, just go as far down as your hip allows it. There you go. But I think he said, and that's what I got from Andrew. He said, when you allow this full flexion movement, it just transfers way better into everyday life because you're not limiting the joints, you're not limiting the muscles, you're not limiting the ligaments. And then he went on a rant where he said, well, people are taping their foot and everything, so you are limiting movement even more. And then you're asking yourself why these guys are hurting themselves because you're limiting movement and you're playing God. And so,
we say athletes and normal people. I hope.
It's two different things, most definitely.
I have one friend of mine who's also a coach who introduced me into professional sport, but not kettlebell, but like handball and stuff as a coach. And he was explaining this. He said, okay, how many times in your life, not doing squats, will you squat down bilaterally, feet in the same direction? So it doesn't happen often. Usually it's one leg a little bit in front or one leg a little bit higher. So he was also saying, deep squats are important to somebody at some point, but try to do a little bit offset squat. So put one leg a little bit higher and one leg a little bit lower. So you squat all the way down and one leg goes into full flexion in the knee or in the hip and the other one doesn't. And then change. So you are training full range of motion, but not bilaterally. I'm using this for 1 year now with my athletes and even with my elderly clients. I also do some personal training. I try to avoid it, but I take some people, which I take people which I feel they can fill me up with energy.
Okay.
So, this is how I choose clients.
Awesome.
So I make them do like one step, one leg is a little bit higher and they squat down. So one leg really comes knee up to here and the other one is not in the full flexion. And those people cannot go ATG squat. But if I go offset, they can bring one leg at a time in the full flexion. So there are a little bit tricks how to do it.
And making, I think there's a lot of skill transfer to everyday life when you make things awkward, because most of the or many times you are like that's sometimes where people are over exaggerating the importance of always keep everything neutral and feet have to blah blah, and you're like, life doesn't work that way.
Okay.
And it's awkward. Life is awkward, and sometimes there will be an imbalance because you do things differently, or it's just like with the individual squat, which I've learned. Now listening to Andrew, I always tell people, make sure you go down as far as you can, but I'm not yelling at folks if they're not able to do it. Then I'm like, listen, like I said, allow your hips to move as far down as you can, because we always have to understand that that life is different for everybody, and everybody's built different to a certain extent. And that's why I think this makes so much sense to have an offset squat, or maybe take your foot to the left or to the right and then maybe go. That's why I think lunges are so awesome, right? Because the lunge is that one exercise where you go for, I mean, what knees over toes guy, what Patrick did is not something special or new. It's just a forward lunge where you go into maximum flexion, which you see the weightlifting guys have done since forever, right? Yeah. But I think the reason why it became so popular is because you have so many coaches and just normal people thinking that full flexion is bad.
Or that the knees shouldn't go above toes.
Exactly, which is such a myth, right?
I usually ask people, to my gym, the people, athletes or clients come and they say, well, I don't want to do squats or anything where my knee goes over my toe. Exactly. And I say, okay, then please go downstairs.
Yeah. It's impossible.
It's not possible. So this is how I convince them. It's simple. You have to. If you want to go downstairs, forward, it's knees over toes.
That's why I love when I talk to people who just make pure sense, right? It sounds so funny, but in the fitness world, sometimes you think people who don't make sense are the ones that get the biggest crowds and views and clicks, and the ones who just follow logical conclusions that just make sense so that even a kid understands it, nobody listens to it.
It's too simple.
It's too, right? It can't be that simple. Well, it actually is. It's just when I'm talking to clients about weight loss. Just yesterday, I had one client here, and she said, well, I've heard, if I eat way too less, I go into this starvation mode where my body doesn't burn fat, and then I even gain fat. I said, well, have you ever seen people in captivity? She said, yes. Well, what do you think? How much food do they get? Maybe the bare minimum, depending on what country you're in captivity in. Look how they look like. They lose weight like crazy. It's a horror, but of course, you will lose weight. It's just
you will lose muscle most of the time.
You will lose muscle. You will lose everything, right? So it's just a plain fact of reality. And so with training, it's the same thing. And that's one of the realizations that I had after talking to so many people now on the podcast and reading these books. We could maybe say that every athlete is probably supposed to do squats.
100%.
Right.
Agree. Yeah. Well, squat is like they say the mother of all lifts or the father of all lifts. But let's say I have a 10-year-old son and he cannot squat. Okay, he cannot because his ankles does not allow them at the time. Maybe it will change, maybe when he will grow, but his ankles are really tight. So my daughter, she can squat down like she was born with a barbell on her back, and my son can't. So it's the same genetics, it's the same father, I hope.
That's so.
Yeah, but the ankle is being built differently. The tendons, the muscle, how they grow, it's different. And I'm not coaching my kids. I said I will never coach my kids. I'm their father, so they have coaches in their clubs, and I just go and watch the game. But when I see them squat on the training, sometimes I come a little bit early and I see them squat. I see he has problems with squat. Now I ask myself, should I teach him how to squat, or will he learn how to squat? Will not doing the full flexion bilaterally influence his life or not? So I'm not doing anything. I ask him a few times, okay, can I see your squat? He does a few squats. I see what the problem is, but I'm not going to say, okay, now stand straight, toes out, hips out, let's go. No, you just, okay, I see there's still some issues. Maybe when he will be 16, and if the coach will start loading weight, then I will say, okay, before you load him, then we go.
Exactly. So it's like letting him or letting, especially a kid or even or a sedentary person that who never moved before, let them learn the movement first and let them see where their limitations are. But when it comes to loading, then we have to follow proper procedures, 100%. But as soon as as long as it's body weight and just finding out, and I see this with kettlebells as well, and that's why I sometimes get hung up that's just maybe experience talking. When people say, but it's supposed to look like this.
Oh, no.
And then I'm saying, no, you don't understand. People are built differently. People move differently. And yes, they follow the same biomechanical reality of the exercise. It's hips and then it's arms extended, rack, but whatever you have, swing, hips back, chest, spine straight, all that kind of stuff. But it still looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Right?
If you go a little bit back to kettlebells, if you look at Ivan Deniso snatching, he's such a huge guy, and he will go side to side.
Yeah.
He just leans. He looks like a big bear who's a little bit drunk and goes up and down.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
We were making jokes about this.
Okay.
He was even doing it in my gym. And then if you look at Anton, it's different technique. If you look at Trudno, he's almost jumping up when he's catching. So they're all top athletes. They're all Master of Sports International class and even above that. But they adjusted to their body type, adjusted to their background, adjusted to their whatever it is.
Yes.
You always adjust a little bit to how you can do it the most efficiently.
And I think that's one of the points when you realize, when you learn more about that stuff, the less you know. It's like, wow, it's you think you finally found out, and then you see, okay, now I talk to these high-level coaches and athletes, and they all do it completely differently. They all have different movement paths, and you're like, wow, this is incredible, right? Everybody finds their path, and there are maybe some very small absolutes that you can teach and that you can say that they work. But at the end of the day, it's like, wow, it's the human being, us human beings, we're so complex. And you mentioned factors. So yesterday I had this conversation about pain. And this one client, she said, my physiotherapist, because we were working out, we were training, and she's technically very sound, so she has a great kinesthetic sense. She's 50 years old. We mostly have people 40, 50, 60. And then we were working out, we were training, and after a couple of trainings, she started getting some headaches. She was like, I don't know, something shoots up here, and then she gets a headache. And I was like, well, and she said, what is this? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe talk to your doctor, talk to the physiotherapist, blah, blah, blah. So she comes back after the physiotherapist, and then she comes with this concise and clear explanation as to why she has that pain. And the only thing that I said was, listen, we listened to your physiotherapist, what he said. If you want my opinion, I think it is not that cut and dry. Pain is a very complex matter. Yeah. That is not, she was like, I was doing this and that. And I was like, no, you weren't doing nothing wrong with your neck. Yeah, it's inexplicable. And maybe certain exercises trigger it. We found out what happens, or what triggered or what triggers this mechanism. Now we found out after a couple of more sessions that she's getting stronger. She still feels it, but it goes away very quickly. And so I'm like, see, it's and so and I've stopped trying to explain it with this absolute sense. Oh, this is exactly why that happens.
You cannot say. You never can say this. Unless you get hit by a car, then you say, hey, it was because the car
Yeah,
hit you.
of course, it was a car accident.
Yeah. There's one thing that I was just talking to coaches, I don't know, 1 week ago. Why are we not doing the same protocol again? And I said, look, because you're a different person now. So your body adapted to this. So we need to change something. Otherwise, you will not get more adaptation. And this is exactly when you say the pain. Maybe this exercise caused the pain in this moment. Maybe if you will repeat this exercise in 1 month, it will not cause that pain. But maybe your bone structure will be different. Maybe your muscle balance will be different at that time. Maybe your tension will be different because you were sleeping on the other side of the pillow or whatever. So yeah, your body always adapts, and this is why it's different because from all the other mechanisms. The other mechanism will always go and will stay the same. 3 sets of 5, it will always be 3 sets of 5. It's mathematically or physically. But your body will adapt to 3 sets of 5, so you have to do something with that. Increase the weight, but at some point you will not be able to increase. So you have to increase the reps, increase the number of sets, change the exercise. And if you come back to the same protocol after 2 years, it will not work the same because you have already adapted and you're a different person than you were 2 years ago. So
Exactly.
the best. The human body is the best thing to research. And then, of course, then you have the mental part.
I mean, that's not even, I mean, we're just talking about the biomechanical reality of joint action and muscles and tendons. But then when you factor in the mind, that's why it becomes such a multifaceted situation where you cannot pinpoint it. And that's kind of like, sometimes it's frustrating as a coach where you cannot really pinpoint the matter. The only thing that I can say is, well, you're weak in the legs. That's why you're not able to squat. Yeah. Right? That's it, right? But when it comes to these minute things like pain or certain imbalances or whatever, sometimes it's like, or one client where you have limited shoulder range of motion on one side and the other side's completely fine with it, all kind of mobility work with it, this and that. And then I've realized, you know what, I think it'll stay that way. Does it hurt? No. Does it limit you? No. Let's leave it. Yeah. Let's leave it. Right?
If it's not bothering you or if it's not dangerous, then don't put too much tension. What I noticed, if you have some problem, let's say like you said in your left shoulder, you're gonna put so much energy into this left shoulder that it's gonna tense up anyways.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. Most definitely. Hey, Gregor, let's end it with this note. Wow, it's been a fascinating discussion. I think we talked for over 2 hours. This is massive, man. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you showing up. There's a lot of value and wisdom in it. We have this podcast. Is a lot of coaches and trainers tune into this podcast on Spotify, especially. And we are getting close to the 1,000 subscriber mark with the podcast only. I mean, the big channel that I have is close to 80,000 subscribers now, but the podcast is a small thing. But it's growing, which is beautiful, and why I think there's so much value, so much wisdom in it. And the more I learn from guys like you, the more I understand. It's learn as much as you can, but don't hold on to it too much, because as soon as you start working with people, it's not black and white. Everything's nuanced. That's what it is.
Those 2 hours flew like 15 minutes.
It's crazy.
I always like to talk about trainings and body and whatever to whoever, especially a guy like you who obviously know a lot, who read a lot, who met a lot of people. So for me, it's always experience. And sometimes when I'm invited to lecture, I learn more than the people who are listening to me. Really. I had the lecture for the Hockey Association, and the questions that are coming to me, I have to think so much. Maybe sometimes I can't answer. I say, okay, I'm not able to answer. But then I go dig and I learn. Even in the same evening, I learn so much new. So I'm gonna dig for all the information you gave me now.
One of the most important things that you have to check out is sportivnipress.com. I'm gonna send you the link. I think it's such a valuable database from Andrew Charniga, the weightlifting scientist. He's totally focused on weightlifting. And he has a lot of good stuff to say. And the guys that I had on the podcast, I don't want to boast, but the guys, not me, the guys that I had on the podcast, the conversations, they're just so fascinating. You hear so much good stuff. I love doing this. It's always such a great learning experience. That's the major reasons why I do this. I mean, I spend hours talking to people, then it gets like what, a couple hundred views. I don't even care for a second about the views, because what I learn in these conversations, it just elevates my knowledge to a place where I'm like, wow, I have to do this all the time. Fascinating. So Gregor, hey man, thank you so much for showing up. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I have to say, I've been invited to many podcasts, and this one looks professional. I like the conversation, the knowledge stuff. So congratulations to you too. Also,
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you find this episode helpful, consider becoming a Kettle Knight. Simply click the join button on our YouTube channel and become a podcast supporter.